Chapter 1276. Open the Space. Chapter 1276. Open the Space. _ Yen didn't know that Banyu was restless as he was wholeheartedly sinking in his marvelous comprehension. He seemed to not know the commotions around him. He knew a new ability of space power Upanishad that even Bello at second sky of incipient god realm didn't know. This kind of layering up spaces used spaces as different facets of a mirror to create many illusions. It was an incredible use of space energy. Yan's real body closed his eyes and his soul altar spun. Many Yen inside the layers of space had different activities and facial expressions. One was laughing, one was shaking his legs contentedly, and another was lowering his head to consider something. They were like his clones with his consciousness and streaks of life. They were the real existences. Oh wow! Freaky! What's going on? Finally, the other warriors had found strange things. They couldn't help but scream and look at the battleship in the middle of the formation and Yen, who was closing his eyes. Inside different spaces around them, they saw many Yans with different activities and expressions. Apparently, Yen wasn't different from his illusions. They were bewildered and scared, the hair on their nape rising. Shut up! All of you! Banyu snorted. The others had their eyes changed. They quieted down but still looked at Yen curiously. In their eyes, Yen was so mysterious and peculiar. It seemed like he could move through different spaces as he pleased. After a while, the strange change happened again. Dozens Yen scattering in different spaces looked like they were summoned. They flew from his left and right. Even though some were smiling or contemplating, they were all heading to Yan's real body. Those people had weaved through the spaces and congregated from different dimensions. Banyu discolored in fright. More warriors gawked as they didn't know what was going on. Different Yans with their own consciousness came from different dimensions and disappeared into Yan's real body. They were the wisps of soul consciousness that he had sent away that now returned to him. After those Yans disappeared, the other warriors found no illusions of Yen in this fantasy zone where countless illusions could be produced. They could still see the lines of battleships on their left and right moving in a diamond-shaped formation. Also, they still saw the warriors with the same aghast expression as them on those battleships. Now, those illusions were looking in the same direction. However, the illusion that should be there didn't exist. Yen didn't exist in this fantasy area. It was like they were standing in an area that had many big mirrors. They could see their reflections in those mirrors, but Yen, the one who was standing next to them, didn't appear in any mirror. It was so strange indeed. Oh, it's so. Yen opened his eyes, the light of understanding sparkling in his pupils. Pop! A fantasy sky ring on his left hand exploded. Many weapons and divine crystals inside that ring quivered then overflowed, disappearing into his glabella. Yen opened a space inside the brilliant incipient extent in his soul altar to gather the materials that used to be stored in his fantasy sky ring. As he had understood the mystery of the layered space, he cleaned his space in his incipient extent to store his stuff. Later on, his incipient extent became his fantasy sky ring. It could store many items. As his thoughts flickered, a divine crystal emerged in his hand. His thoughts changed and the divine crystal he had just taken out of the incipient extent got back to its place in his incipient extent. He chuckled. With the new understanding of spatial ability, he was able to open his incipient extent, the fantasy world, and connect it to the real world. He created a fantasy sky ring that could store billions of items. Closing his eyes to feel for a while, he nodded to Banyu. He wasn't really curious about the fantasy zone anymore. He returned to the cabin that Banyu had given him. He stayed there and sensed his new ability. He had a strong feeling that he was about to break to second sky of incipient god realm. He needed time to comprehend it. Inside the fantasy zone, the battleships of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce were still heading in a direction. Banyu had come here many times, so he was familiar with the fantasy zone. However, he still needed to keep contacting the Thousand Fantasy Sect to get instructions from them. They had to change their directions continuously. There's someone 1 hour behind you. They're going to the Fantasy Star too. Please give them a ride. They're from the Broken Hall. Our Thousand Fantasy Sect has invited them here. They got some problems, so their battleships were broken. It's not easy for them to travel through the fantasy zone. Please help them. Today, as Banyu was talking to a member of the Thousand Fantasy sect through the Sound Stone, he was given new instructions about the direction, then suddenly requested something. Banyu didn't think it was strange, so he agreed. He said that he would pick the others up on the way. He had come to the Fantasy Star many times, and he had encountered this situation before. Some warriors might have gotten lost and done something stupid like fighting their own illusions and breaking their battleships if they came here for the first time without a navigator. Sometimes, the Thousand Fantasy sect asked them to pick up some warriors related to the Fantasy Star and give them a ride to the star. Thus, the Thousand Fantasy sect didn't need to send someone from the Fantasy Star to pick up the others. Pay attention. After 1 hour, we will pick up some people on our way, said Banyu. The warriors on the other battleships nodded to him, but they were still keeping an eye on Banyu's battleship and on Yan's closed cabin to be exact. They were so curious, though. As Yan had joined them unknowingly, they were curious already. It was because Banyu was famous for his stubbornness and for strictly keeping the rules. Bringing people the Fantasy Star hadn't approved was an act of violating the contract. In the past several years, Tsunami Chamber of Commerce had a lot of good opportunities, but Banyu had denied them because he wasn't a flexible businessman. However, it confused them a lot when Banyu had brought someone unidentified who was against their agreement with the Thousand Fantasy sect. 1 hour later, in the layers of illusions in front of them, there were 3 warriors who the Fantasy Zone was creating many illusions of their images like in the mirrors. There were 2 elderly warriors and a girl with her face veiled waiting for them. The warriors of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce had their eyes brighten when they saw the girl in the distance. Although she wore a veil, she could still surprise them. The girl wore a pure white dress with the hem inlaid with the accessories of the twinkling stars and moons. However, her slim, white wrists were tied by a dark, bluish chain that had electrical beams winding around. From time to time, people could hear thunder from her. Apparently, the broken hall had confined this girl. However, her clear eyes were like a bright moon above the white veil that could still charm people. The 2 old men of the broken hall had first and second sky of incipient god realm. They watched her carefully, their faces stern. After they recognized that Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's battleships were coming, they turned away to see. Hey, the real versions of us are here. The first sky of incipient god realm screamed and waved his hands. However, at the same time, the surrounding illusions screamed the same way and wave. His illusions had made the same actions. He made it more difficult for the others to distinguish between the real warriors and the illusions. Banyu frowned and looked at the 3 people ahead of him. A deep cyan light sparkled in his eyes. A special crystal in his hand released magical energy fluctuations. That crystal was from the Thousand Fantasy sect, and it was given to Tsunami Chamber of Commerce so they could navigate and find the real objects among the illusions in the Fantasy Zone. Banyu held the crystal to sense. Then he pointed to a group of people over there. Their ships moved to that area. 3 minutes later, the ships stopped by the other 3. Banyu wore a serious visage and called, as per request of the Thousand Fantasy sect, "We're giving you a ride to the Fantasy Star. Please embark quickly." The 2 old men of the broken hall exchanged looks and then nodded. They brought the girl and flew to Banyu's ship. Banyu frowned and threw a quick glance at Yan's closed cabin. Banyu said hastily, "You guys should get on the first ship. My ship carries a lot of precious materials for the Thousand Fantasy sect. I'm afraid that we don't have enough rooms for you guys." "Well, someone is there. Why did you tell us that you didn't have more room? Don't deceive us." The first sky of incipient god realm expert snorted. He didn't care about Banyu's objection and stormed towards them, landing by Banyu. He looked at Yan's cabin and frowned. "There are 2 empty rooms there. We just need 1. We don't need you guys to take care of us a lot." Then, the 2 old men of the broken hall brought the girl in the white dress to one of the empty cabins. "I need a quiet environment." Suddenly, a stiff and cold voice came from the adjacent occupied room. The 2 old men of the broken hall became stern. They looked at Banyu. The man at second sky of incipient god realm laughed evilly. "Well, that one isn't from your Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, right? Our broken hall, Thousand Fantasy sect, and the Heaven River Temple do business with your Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. I know the agreement between you guys and the Thousand Fantasy Sect. You're not allowed to bring strangers to the Fantasy Star. You're violating the agreement, aren't you? As soon as he arrived, he found someone learning the Upanishad in Banyu's cabin. As he knew many secret rules of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, he immediately understood that Shuryen wasn't part of the staff of Chamber of Commerce. That's why he came to make it clear. Hearing him, Banyu grimaced and shouted, "It's our Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's business. You don't need to mind, even though you're from the Broken Hall." The two elders of the Broken Hall frowned when they encountered stubborn Banyu. They could smell trouble here. They knew how mysterious and intimidating Tsunami Chamber of Commerce was. Even the God Clan had to step away from this Chamber of Commerce. Of course, the Broken Hall wouldn't dare to turn its back against Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. They wanted to trouble Banyu. But since they knew he was tough, they couldn't trouble him anymore. They didn't notice that the clear eyes of the girl in their confinement had sparkled with a strange light when she heard his voice. At the same time, Shuryen also made a surprise sound as he seemed to find something strange. Then, the closed cabin's door sprang open. Chapter 1277. You're not qualified. Chapter 1277. You're not qualified, _ Shuryen stood on the stone bed of the cold chamber. He squinted to have a better focus at the girl that the two incipient God Realm experts of the Broken Hall were confining. She wore a veil and she couldn't move. However, the light emitting from her bright moon eyes was really touching. Banyu stood aside and said darkly, "Friends from the Broken Hall, outsiders aren't allowed to interfere with our Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's business. Without permission from the manager of Cold Iron City, you can't stay on the ship. Please leave." In this vast galaxy, Tsunami Chamber of Commerce was powerful and wealthy. Even the God Clan had to give them face. Although the Broken Hall was also intimidating, they were dependent on Tsunami Chamber of Commerce in some aspects. The warriors of the Broken Hall frowned when they heard Banyu. They became hesitant. "He isn't from your Chamber of Commerce. How can he embark this ship? Tsunami Chamber of Commerce has done something against the agreement. Aren't you afraid that the Thousand Fantasy Sect will question you?" The first Sky of Incipient God Realm expert shouted. However, he was just trying to sound bold. "It's our Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's business. You guys from the Broken Hall don't need to interfere. I made myself clear enough. Without the permission of our Cold Iron City's manager, other people can embark this ship. If he's here, he sure got the permission from our manager. You guys didn't, so you should leave." Banyu's face was stern. He lifted his head to look at the other battleships. Some war chariots suddenly flew out carrying dozens of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's warriors who didn't look friendly at all. The two old men of the Broken Hall were called Wei Yun and Xing Sheng. Wei Yun was at first Sky of Incipient God Realm and Xing Shang was at second Sky of Incipient God Realm. Xing Shang was Xing Ming's cousin who was famous for his sinister deeds in the Broken Hall. Also, he was loyal and dedicated to Xing Ming. The Broken Hall consisted of different halls. Xing Ming was the loyal subordinate of Caesar's father in the past. He was in charge of those scattered halls. He chained them and consolidated them into one force. When Caesar's father had power, Xing Ming didn't have many benefits. Caesar's father had the power to decide many things. However, when Caesar began to be the hall master, he always cultivated alone. He didn't care too much about the matters of the Broken Hall, which made Xing Ming have the chance to manage all the works of the subordinate halls. Xing Ming's power became too influential. He had become the one with real power in the Broken Hall. The masters of the subordinating halls had only reported to Xing Ming. Xing Ming had made good advantage of his power to enrich his family. He had spent many precious cultivating materials of the Broken Hall on nurturing the experts of the Xing family. Eventually, the Xing family had become an intimidating family of the Broken Hall and could even replace the role of Caesar's family. Xing Shang was Xing Ming's cousin, a member of the Xing family. He only listened to Xing Ming while swaggering in the Broken Hall. Xing Sheng knew that the Broken Hall wasn't weak, but they couldn't offend Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. Thus, although Banyu was bold, he had pulled himself together. He decided to yield and retreat the brutal makings he had formed after so many years. His team was going to leave this ship. Xing Sheng glared at Wei Yun next to him, cursing him for the bad idea under his breath that embarrassed him. He snorted, "We should go. Just embark another ship." He signaled Wei Yun to bring the girl and leave. Swoosh! The veil covering the girl's face was torn strangely, pieces of it falling like leaves. An extremely exquisite face was revealed. Her white skin was like beautiful jade with the moonlight. She looked so pure that people were absorbed with her looks. The warriors of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce riding the war chariots had prepared well. When they saw the girl's glamour after the veil was gone, they felt enchanted. They eyed her, deeply showing the face when a normal man saw an extremely beautiful woman. "It's you, indeed," Shi Yan sounded surprised. That girl was Ouyang Lu Shuang, the moon god of the three-god sect who cultivated moonlight. She used to seal herself inside a meteorite in Sky Meteor City. At that time, her realm was already profound. As soon as she got on the ship, Shi Yan got a familiar feeling. It was because Ouyang Lu Shuang cultivated moonlight power, which wasn't different from Shi Yan's star power Upanishad. It was the magical cultivating technique that the God clan had spread out dozens of thousands of years ago. Now, Ouyang Lu Shuang was at first sky of incipient God realm. She gave people a pure, holy feeling. Apparently, her realm was more marvelous and profound. Shi Yan was very surprised. His cultivating progress was rapid because of his devouring power Upanishad. As Ouyang Lu Shuang had cultivated only one power, it was astonishing that she could progress that quickly. Shi Yan knew that Ouyang Lu Shuang should have some good encounters. Otherwise, at a normal warrior's cultivating speed, she wouldn't be able to reach first sky of incipient God realm in a short time like this. "What do you want?" As Wei Yun saw that Ouyang Lu Shuang's veil was torn, he had a concealed, obscene gleam flash in his pupils. He snorted and rolled his eyes at Shi Yan. "Kid, you shouldn't poke your nose in the Broken Hall's business." If Shi Yan wasn't on the ship that hinted his high position and echelon, Wei Yun would have attacked him immediately. "Friends, I just received the request to give you a ride. I'm not responsible for your safety." Ban Yu frowned and reminded the others. Xing Sheng wore a dark face, coldly looking at Shi Yan and then at Ban Yu. The vicious light sparkled in his eyes, but he hadn't said anything yet. Shi Yan didn't react to their words. He just looked at Ouyang Lu Shuang and the chains on her wrists. Shi Yan and this woman didn't have a close friendship or anything like that. However, his star power Upanishad came from Ouyang Lu Shuang's precursor. From this point on, he owed the Ouyang family a favor. Moreover, Ouyang Lu Shuang was from Grace Mainland. After he had fused with Grace Mainland's origin, he had unconsciously considered the creatures from Grace Mainland as his family members. Seeing Ouyang Lu Shuang get confined, he considered the possibility of saving her. Ouyang Lu Shuang's eyes were clear and tranquil. She just looked at him and had no intention of begging. However, Shi Yan felt a little embarrassed under her gaze. He gave a slight cough and said, "She's my friend. Leave her to me. I'll explain to Caesar." His words sounded natural. Although Caesar was the Hall Master of the Broken Hall, a famous character in this universe, Shi Yan's position now was higher than his. Although their realms were different, as he was the Bloodthirsty Forces Master, it was enough to make up for the gap. He thought that it was natural, but the others didn't think so. Wei Yun and Xing Sheng, the two experts of the Broken Hall, heard him and their face became cold and harsh. Caesar was the Hall Master of the Broken Hall. Although he didn't involve himself in the matters of the organization, he was their pillar. He was respected more than his father that year. Even Xing Sheng, the haughty member of the Broken Hall due to his powerful cousin, still had great respect for Caesar. It was because Caesar was at the immortal realm. In this vast sea of stars, there weren't many immortal realm experts. Thus, Caesar was the foundation and the pride of the Broken Hall. But in this place, an unknown young man had called their master by his real name without respect. He didn't put Caesar in his eyes. It made Wei Yun and Xing Sheng feel insulted. It was an insult to the entire Broken Hall. Banyu of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce also had an awkward countenance. He had a gleam of irony in his eyes that he didn't want to conceal. Caesar, the hall master of the Broken Hall, was famous for his passion for practicing martial arts. His fame was well known around the universe. At the immortal realm, this powerful character didn't meet up with other people regularly. This unknown young man had said nonsense. Apparently, he didn't think that Caesar was a respectful senior. He didn't know the immensity of earth and heaven. Banyu had a conclusion for his assessment of Shuryen. The name of our Broken Hall's master is something you can take in vain. If you are the president of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, the sect master of the Thousand Fantasy Sect, or the master of the Heaven River Temple, you can say his name. You're just a stinky kid. Do you think you're qualified to say his name? You know nothing. Well, then don't blame me for giving you a lesson on behalf of your seniors. Wei Yun snorted. He wanted to attack Shuryen directly. Xing Sheng sneered, "Don't kill him. Just break his limbs. It's not good to overreact. Don't fight on my ships." Banyu couldn't help but shout when he saw the situation accelerate. Take him out. Xing Sheng was still wary of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. He nodded to Wei Yun and signaled him to give face to Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. They shouldn't create any unnecessary dispute. The warriors of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce around were frightened. Their line of sight shifted from the two experts of the Broken Hall to Shuryen and then to Banyu. They were waiting for Banyu's instructions. Banyu didn't change his countenance. He tacitly allowed the Broken Hall to teach Shuryen a lesson. It was because Banyu thought that Shuryen shouldn't interfere with others' business and tear the veil on the girl's face. Also, he shouldn't offend Caesar. Banyu thought that it could be a good lesson so Shuryen could know how cruel this life was. He had considered Shuryen a junior who had just come to experience life. He didn't know the dangers hidden in the Sea of Stars where there were some forces he shouldn't offend. Teach me? Shuryen grinned, his eyes cold and dark. He turned his head to look at the illusions of Wei Yun and Xing Sheng in the layered space. His soul altar spun and waves of energy rippled through his body, expanding in just a blink of an eye. When that happened, Wei Yun's and Xing Sheng's reflections in those layers of space seemed to receive a new vitality. They became lively, wiggled out of their spaces, and stormed toward the real Wei Yun and Xing Sheng. All of a sudden, the strange illusions in the mirrors had become demons that attempted to kill the true bodies. Wei Yun and Xing Sheng were petrified. They screamed in fear, their minds shaken. Since the two of them had stayed in this fantasy zone for a long time, they knew how bizarre it was. They also knew that the Thousand Fantasy Sect could use illusions to attack the enemies. Seeing their own illusions dashing towards them, they instinctively thought that the Thousand Fantasy Sect's member was attacking them. While they were still panicked, Shuryen squinted and the 5 starlight chains shot out of his eyes. They wound around Ouyang Lu Shuang quickly and directly pulled her into the cabin. Shuryen then walked out of his cabin and sneered, "Teach me? Well, let alone you two. Even Caesar isn't qualified to do that." Chapter 1278. Teasing. Chapter 1278. Teasing, _ As Xing Shan and Wei Yun were in the fantasy zone, this miraculous place had projected dozens of illusions from their real bodies. However, they were just illusions without the ability to attack. However, something strange happened. Dozens of their illusions suddenly became lively as if they had lives. Their vitality and power surged, breaking the mirrors to storm toward the real bodies and attack them. Xing Shan cultivated lightning and thunder power Upanishad, and Wei Yun cultivated a rare cloud power Upanishad. Xing Shan's soul moved and his incipient extent arose with exploding lightning strikes. The commotions inside his incipient extent were earth-shaking. Several thousand lightning bolts as big as massive snakes in Xing Shan's incipient extent became real after he had poured his god power in them. They then congregated into a massive lightning river. Thunder reverberated and lightning flashed, sending dazzling sparks with destructive power. The lightning river had covered Xing Shan's illusions before they could reach him. Wei Yun made one hand seal. As soon as the hand seal appeared, dozens of thousands of the 5-colored clouds including orange, red, black, blue, gray, and white appeared. These bright clouds were like big balloons hovering around him. Each of the clouds had Wei Yun's power and his life seal. Dozens of Wei Yun's illusions were confined by his clusters of clouds as if those clouds were really sticky. Xing Shan and Wei Yun were at incipient god realm with profound cultivation bases. When they saw the illusions change, they thought that the warriors of the Thousand Fantasy sect had attacked them. They immediately released the incipient extent to use the marvelous abilities of their power Upanishads to resist. They were afraid that they would fall into a disadvantaged situation. However, they had overestimated those illusions. Although they had urged the power of their incipient extent with special abilities, they eventually found that those illusions were actually illusions. The lightning river and the brilliant clouds had smashed the illusions directly and left nothing. Looking at the layered space out there, the illusions of their reflections appeared again, which weren't different from the previous ones. They felt defeated as if they had just used all of their power to hit the void. The long lightning river and the five-colored clusters of cloud were so intimidating above their heads. However, the two experts looked stiff and they stood there bewilderedly. Banyu looked at Shi Yan and felt panicked. The warriors of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce around also looked at Shi Yan and laughed discreetly. They knew that Shi Yan was tricking the others because they had seen Shi Yan's awesome deed previously. Cough. Cough. Banyu gave a slight cough, frowning and his gaze raking through his staff. Wei Yun and Xing Shan were baffled. They glanced at Shi Yan and found something. There was no illusion of Shi Yan in that layered space. They immediately knew that Shi Yan had a special understanding of this fantasy zone and was able to use it to affect the illusions here. Eventually, Xing Shan and Wei Yun knew that those illusions looked intimidating, but they didn't have a bit of power. Shi Yan had teased them. Xing Shan and Wei Yun were enraged. They could see that Shi Yan was purposely teasing them. Too humiliating. Inside the room behind Shi Yan, Ouyang Luo Shuang was surprised. Her white jade face was sparkling, her heart discreetly shocked. It had been so many years since she saw Shi Yan. This time, it was just by chance. When she met Shi Yan, she found hope. However, when she found that Shi Yan had only incipient god realm, she had dismissed this hope. She knew that she couldn't get rid of it easily. Thus, when she looked at Shi Yan, she didn't have any begging thoughts reflected in her eyes. She didn't want Shi Yan to rescue her. It was because she thought that Shi Yan wasn't an equal match to Wei Yun and Xing Shan. If he tried to help her, he would be in big trouble. She didn't want him to get involved. However, after that, Shi Yan was haughty enough to call Caesar's name. He even said that he would talk to Caesar about this and that even Caesar wasn't qualified to teach him. It had astounded Ouyang Luo Shuang a lot. Just like Banyu, she thought that Shi Yan just talked nonsense. She knew how strong the Broken Hall was. She knew that the number of people who dared to offend the Broken Hall could be counted with the fingers of one hand. She also thought that Shi Yan was just stupidly arrogant. Right after that, Shi Yan had used the abilities of his space power Upanishad to tease Xing Shan and Wei Yun. The others had tried their best power to attack nothing, which made her feel both funny and panicked. She was afraid that Shi Yan couldn't bear the flame of rage from the other two. She became restlessly anxious. And now her worry became true. Xing Shan and Wei Yun had aimed their attacks at Shi Yan. The river with lightning bolts and five-colored clusters of clouds fell from the sky under Xing Shan's and Wei Yun's control. They had thundering momentum that pressed down. It was over. Ouyang Luo Shuang couldn't help but close her eyes and sigh. She felt a little shame as Shi Yan was in trouble because of her. She heard Banyu screaming in fear. She was surprised, her eyes wide open. A beautiful light bloomed in her pretty eyes. The long lightning river and countless clusters of clouds pressing down had disappeared strangely as if they had disappeared into thin air altogether. Shi Yan disappeared with them too. Just like her, Xing Shan, Wei Yun, Banyu, and Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's warriors were astounded. They felt bewildered while they scanned around to find something instinctively. Ouyang Luo Shuang wanted to know what had just happened. Why is that? Banyu muttered. He could see clearly that at the glimpse the lightning river and the brilliant clouds descended. Shi Yan, their target, suddenly grinned as his hands pulled something. Just pulling once and something happened miraculously as if he had changed the nature's rules. He could even condense or tear the void as he pleased. Banyu didn't understand space power Upanishad or what was mysterious about Shi Yan's pulling gesture, but he knew that Xing Shan's and Wei Yun's terrifying attacks had disappeared with that pull. It was like an invisible space had swallowed them directly and sealed them in an unknown space. And Shi Yan had disappeared altogether. Look! All of a sudden, a warrior of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce screamed, his shaking finger pointing in a direction. Everybody looked in that direction. It was an area in the layered space where there were 7 transport ships that held Banyu, Xing Shan, Wei Yun, and everyone here. Besides them, there was 1 more person and 2 more wonders. Shi Yan was there standing on the ship as if he had never moved. The lightning river and countless 5-colored clusters of clouds halted above his head as if he had paused them all. In that area, they remained their same postures and were staying put. Only Shi Yan was grinning and walking towards them. Freaking weird. Everybody felt the hair rise on their napes. They were aghast as if they were encountering ghosts. They felt so insecure. Even Banyu, Xing Shan, and Wei Yun weren't exceptions. Although they had the incipient God Realm cultivation base, they didn't know what was going on here or how to cope with it. In their eyes, Shi Yan could confine the space, weave through layers of space, distort it, or make it disappear. He seemed to be able to do anything. In this fantasy zone, Shi Yan was terrifyingly mysterious. They felt that it would be tough to counter him. Xing Shan and Wei Yun were baffled for seconds. Their faces darkened, and then they looked at Ouyang Luo Shuang in the cabin. They knew clearly that they were really here, and the space that had Shi Yan over there was just the reflection of their space. As long as they could still confine Ouyang Luo Shuang in the real world and deliver her to the fantasy star, their mission was complete. They would choose to forget this section of fighting Shi Yan in this fantasy zone. They would never mention it with anyone else. I told you. I will explain this to Caesar. However, Shi Yan's cold voice came from every direction as if there were dozens of Shi Yan shouting at the same time. Banyu's and Xing Shan's eardrums were grumblingly shaken as if they heard sudden thunderclaps. Boom, boom, boom. Just like a broken mirror, many layers of space that normal people couldn't see shattered grumblingly. Billions of pieces of broken space shot out like flying sabers. In that glimpse of time, the fantasy zone seemed to become a meat grinder that could crush everything, including the bodies and the souls. Banyu discolored in fright and shouted ear-splittingly, "Don't. Our Tsunami Chamber of Commerce isn't involved in this." Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's warriors were frightened. They tried to ride their war chariots to dodge those shooting pieces. They were scared that those fatal things would destroy their souls. Xing Shan and Wei Yun were the experts at incipient God Realm, so they knew that the pieces of the shattered space were the sharpest things in this world. Seeing billions of fragments attacking, they exchanged looks and turned into a lightning bolt and a cluster of cloud running away in an unknown direction. They didn't care about Ouyang Luo Shuang, Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, or anyone else. They just wanted to save their lives. Banyu and the warriors of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce looked desperate when the billions of space fragments shot towards them. They regretted that they brought Shi Yan, an unknown warrior, to the fantasy zone on their ship. They understood that Shi Yan was an expert who had a profound cultivation base in space power Upanishad. This sort of warrior in the vast sea of stars were the most dangerous existences that people had to be cautious of when dealing with them. If those pieces of shattered space headed towards the fantasy star, they could even crush the entire planet. Tsunami Chamber of Commerce also had the staff cultivate space power Upanishad, so they knew how formidable it was when they used their ultimate power. They knew that the top warriors who cultivated space power Upanishad didn't need to spend a lot of efforts to destroy a whole life star. With only a thought, the entire world could vanish. It depended on their moods, though. When the countless space fragments were shooting toward them, Banyu's group closed their eyes and waited for their deaths. They sighed that they weren't lucky this time. They couldn't even have the thought of protesting. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. The great massacre that should have happened didn't happen. Banyu opened his eyes, his stiff body shivering. By his side, Shi Yan was standing quietly at his spot as if he had never moved an inch. The billions of shattered space pieces that were swarming toward them had disappeared into thin air. Somehow, it was just their hallucination that they had imagined out of nothingness. Banyu was bewildered for a while. Then, he clasped his hand and tried to force a smile. Buddy, don't tease us. I'm not young anymore. I can't handle it. Please, in the coming part of our journey, please make it smooth. Don't scare us more, okay? Well, let's see about how I feel, Shuryen smiled frankly. Chapter 1279, Primordial Spirit Lock. Chapter 1279, Primordial Spirit Lock, _ Shuryen and Ouyang Luoshuang were staying in the cabin on the transport ship. They closed the door and denied talking to Banyu. After Banyu had seen Shuryen's spatial marvelous abilities, he knew that this young man could have extraordinary status and power. He then lifted up his cold appearance and tried to talk to him to form a relationship. Shuryen neglected him. Inside the room, the ceiling had precious gems and pearls that illuminated the space. Ouyang Luoshuang had snow-white skin and was sitting silently. Her clear eyes looked at Shuryen. Let me see if I can unchain you. Shuryen frowned. After he had finished, he didn't care if Ouyang Luoshuang would protest. He directly grabbed her slender, jade-like hands. He didn't pay attention to Ouyang Luoshuang's pretty eyes to see that she was frightened. Ouyang Luoshuang's hands were beautiful. They were white and soft. Each of her fingers was like a scallion with skin so thin that he could even see the small veins under her skin. Then, a dark bluish chain wound around her white wrists, locking her senses and her ability to talk and move. Shuryen held her ivory-like hands and focused. The starlight filled his eyes while he gathered his star energy and sent it through her hands toward the chains. Sizzle! 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 The lightning beams winding around the chains activated. They broke Shuryen's star energy into pieces in just a blink. Ouyang Luoshuang's jade-like hands chilled instantly as if the cold energy had occupied them. The electrical beams shot through her veins. She couldn't help but quiver in pain. Shuryen discolored slightly. He hurried to retreat his star energy and her hands. The cold air emitted from Ouyang Luoshuang's hands like a white mist. In the next moment, her hands regained her body temperature while the electrical beams moving in her veins returned to the chains. Apparently, those chains weren't ordinary items. When someone touched them, they reacted terribly by hurting the one they shackled. It kept the rescuer from taking rash actions. Taking a deep breath, Shuryen pulled himself together. He didn't touch her hands anymore, a light sparkling in his pupils. A flow of robust soul energy flew out of his soul altar. Just like a wisp of smoke, it seeped into Ouyang Luoshuang's body. Shuryen attempted to sense with his soul first to see what strange things had happened to Ouyang Luoshuang. Then, he was going to decide what to do. His soul energy with the life power Upanishad like a warm sea covered Ouyang Luoshuang. In the sea of life that he intended to create, Ouyang Luoshuang's face glowed healthily as the pressure in her body was reduced and she felt more comfortable. Shuryen's soul consciousness seized the chance to enter her body and head to her soul altar. Suddenly, a struggling soul came from the chains on Ouyang Luoshuang's hands. That soul was wiggling so hard that it activated the lightning power on the chains. Quickly, the lightning beams began to crawl on her hands and expand to her entire body. Sizzle! 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 The lightning bolts shot out and the burning smell filled the room. Shuryen discolored in fear. He hurried to retreat his wisp of soul consciousness. However, it was strange that as soon as his soul consciousness got out of Ouyang Luoshuang's body, the power of the chains disappeared instantly. Ouyang Luoshuang looked relaxed and tired. She quietly looked at Shuryen, her clear eyes showing her reluctant pain. Hey, buddy! Buddy! Banyu called him from the outside and said sincerely, "You shouldn't do anything rash or forced to break those chains. You will kill your friend altogether." Shuryen's face became dark. He threw a look at the door and the door sprang open. Banyu entered the room, his face stern. "I wanted to tell you about the chains, but you didn't give me a chance. I think you should allow me to talk about it now. Tell me, how do I break these chains?" Shuryen sounded cold. "There's no way to break it," Banyu forced a smile. Seeing the malicious light sparkle in Yan's pupils, he was frightened, so he hastened to add, "There is a key. Each primordial spirit lock has one key. You can use that special key to unlock it quickly." Primordial spirit lock? Yan frowned. What is this lock? The primordial spirit lock is strange. It has the wisp of this lady's soul inside. It's fused with her soul, so if you break the chains, the wisp of her soul will be broken altogether. Then, her soul will explode. The primordial spirit lock can confine the body, the god power, and mainly the soul. "Did you find her soul struggling inside the chains when you intruded it right now?" said Banyu. Yan nodded. It had happened exactly like what he described. When Yan was about to enter Ouyang Luo Shuang's Sea of Consciousness, the lightning beams shot out from the chains together with her soul wiggling. Thus, he found that it wasn't right. He immediately left. Otherwise, Ouyang Luo Shuang's soul inside the chains would have burned down, which would also kill her host's soul. "How come you are so familiar with this kind of lock?" asked Yan coldly. Banyu looked embarrassed as he spoke begrudgingly. "Because the blacksmith of our Tsunami Chamber of Commerce invented this primordial spirit lock. It's one of the most expensive items that Tsunami Chamber of Commerce sells. Each set of the primordial spirit lock has only one key. Without this key, if he forcefully unlocked the chain, the host soul of the victim will perish altogether. It isn't easy to get this primordial spirit lock. Each set of them is extremely expensive, so only the rich forces like the Broken Hall, the Thousand Fantasy Sect, or the Heaven River Temple could buy them. If they use this special lock to confine this lady, I think her identity isn't ordinary." Banyu's eyes sparkled. He studied Yan to see his reaction. Yan didn't fail him. His reaction was extreme. He cursed directly. "Your Tsunami Chamber of Commerce lacks morality. You guys are despicable, indeed. The blacksmith who invented this primordial spirit lock shouldn't reproduce. If I meet this guy, I will confine him in the middle of the chaotic space and shatter that space. I will let him taste the feeling of his soul and body dividing into different spaces." Banyu paled instantly. Yan's eyes were so cold. He looked at the man and grinned fiendishly. "Well, do you so happen to be that bastard?" No. Banyu shook his head continuously. He was more panic-stricken as he gave a dry smile. I haven't reached such level in blacksmithing. If I was that excellent, I wouldn't be here now." Although the blacksmith who had invented the primordial spirit lock wasn't Banyu, he was a precursor in Banyu's family. It was that precursor's merit that allowed Banyu to join Tsunami Chamber of Commerce and become the captain of a transport fleet. Banyu mentioned this to increase his value. However, Yan's reaction was extreme, so Banyu had to curse himself for his bad mouth. "Well, better that it's not you." Yan gave a faint smile and then shouted. "There is no other solution besides using the key?" No solution." Banyu shook his head. However, after a moment, he thought of something. "Oh, right. There is a solution. I heard that an immortal realm expert can draw the soul out of the chain. Then, he could use his supernatural power to break the chain." He looked at Yan, bent his body slightly, and cried, "With your position and status, I think it won't be difficult to find an immortal realm expert to help her, right?" Before Yan had fought Wei Yun and Xing Shang, he used to boast arrogantly and didn't show respect to Caesar. At that time, Banyu thought that Yan didn't know the immensity of this world. However, after the battle against Wei Yun and Xing Shang, Banyu had to change his opinions about Yan when he knew Yan got the space power Upanishad. He began to doubt that Yan perhaps held a noble status and that he might have been telling the truth that he was qualified to talk with Caesar. Thus, he had tried to create a good relationship with Yan to know his real identity. If Yan was that sort of character, he had to be servile to him for sure. Thus, he proactively lowered his status when talking to Yan. Yan looked at Banyu and sneered discreetly. He knew what this man had in his head. "I don't know any immortal realm expert." "Oh, so when you talked about Caesar," Banyu was baffled. "Oh well, you're pretty old but you're still that innocent?" "Of course, I was trying to scare the two experts of the Broken Hall. Didn't you see that?" Yan sounded ironic. Banyu paled. He snorted, his eyes filled with disappointment. He walked out of the cabin directly. Since Ouyang Luoshuang was chained by the primordial spirit lock, she couldn't move or talk. However, she could still hear and see them. Just like Banyu, she was now filled with disappointment. She had hoped that Shiryen could know someone at the immortal realm that could help her unlock this primordial spirit lock. However, hearing what Shiryen had just said, Ouyang Luoshuang's hope vanished. She felt begrudgingly upset. What kind of look is that? Shiryen snorted. He could see her disappointment. Don't worry. I will help you remove this primordial spirit lock thing. If I can't find an immortal realm expert, I can find the key, right? Why are you looking at me like I'm a hoax? Are you kidding me? Ouyang Luoshuang sighed, but the disappointment in her eyes remained. She had heard from Xing Shang and Wei Yun that Xing Ming kept the key of the primordial spirit lock on her wrists. As Xing Ming was at third sky of incipient god realm and kept the main power of the broken hall with only one person, it was like giving the sheep to the wolf's mouth when Shiryen wanted to take the key from him. She didn't believe that Shiryen could take the key from Xing Ming. She was so worried that she wanted to tell him not to do that. Unfortunately, she couldn't talk. Ouyang Luoshuang's soul was also restricted, so she couldn't use her soul to communicate with Shiryen. Shiryen watched her for a while and then felt bored. He didn't want to talk to her anymore. Thus, he sat down next to her and sank in his thoughts. He had offended the Broken Hall before he arrived at the Fantasy Star. The purpose of this trip was to get the support of the leaders of the Thousand Fantasy Sect, the Broken Hall, and the Heaven River Temple. But now, it was more difficult. He had a headache as he was considering how to deal with the three powerful monsters at the Immortal Realm when he arrived at the Fantasy Star. Chapter 1280. Guard the tree stump and wait for the rabbit. Chapter 1280. Guard the tree stump and wait for the rabbit. Fantasy Star. In the middle of a lake inside a forest were some simple bamboo cottages. Early in the morning, the thick mist fumed from lake carried abundant spirit chi that made this place a wonderland from the fairy tales. Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine were staying on the islet in the middle of the lake. They were discussing the marvel of their powers Upanishads and the attainment they got after years of cultivating and comprehending the truth of natural power Upanishad. They hoped that they could gather more useful knowledge from the others to increase their realms. Now, they were learning from each other's opinions and trying to decode the secret of Bloodthirsty's remains. However, they failed every time. It wasn't an exception this time. They sat cross-legged inside the bamboo cottage and formed a triangle formation. 3 heavenly fragrant soul-soothing jade boxes lay open in front of them. However, Bloodthirsty's remains inside the boxes were invisible. Both the naked eye and the soul consciousness couldn't see it. Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine reached out their hands and touched the objects inside the boxes. They released their power at the same time, striking bones inside to see what they were hiding. However, an unknown force from the bones then counterattacked them and shook their minds hard. They had to retract their hands, their eyes tired. They shook their heads reluctantly. We haven't touched a bit of that marvelous energy. I wonder how he can comprehend it. Ling Xiang's finger quivered when he knocked at the lid of the box. After many years, I wonder if the God Lord has found anything. If someone besides Bloodthirsty could understand this power, it would be the God Lord only, I assume, Lorraine contemplated, her face heavy. After that battle, the God Lord was hurt severely. His body shattered and his soul was damaged badly. He had to slowly and quietly recover. I don't think he has spent time to learn the mysterious power from Bloodthirsty's remains. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had 10,000 years of living in peace without worrying about keeping our star areas from being invaded, Caesar snorted. Ling Xiang and Lorraine nodded in agreement. They thought that whoever rumored that Caesar was just a nerd who was so passionate about learning martial arts and didn't know how to treat and manage his organization was a liar. He did have keen eyes and a thorough thought process. With the God Lord's tyrannical bearings that year, if his realm and power hadn't been affected after that battle, he would have subdued all the forces of the Thousand Fantasy Sect, Broken Hall, and Heaven River Temple and quickly make them the God Clan's dependent territories. It was because he didn't have any solution to do that. The bloodthirsty cortege of 8 hadn't all fallen, so the 4 great heavenly kings still had the pressure. Thus, even though the God clan had ruled the cosmos for 10,000 years, they knew that they should behave. They didn't explicitly invade the forces that could be a threat to them like Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, Imperial Dark Tribe, the Thousand Fantasy Sect, the Broken Hall, or Heaven River Temple. I heard from Tsunami Chamber of Commerce that Minghao, Xianhe, and Frederick notified them that they have acknowledged that kid's master position. Tsunami Chamber of Commerce announced that he would go to the Fantasy Star to meet us 3 to discuss the alliance to be formed. What do you think about it? Said Lorraine, the master of Heaven River Temple. Ling Xiang is already prepared, Caesar squinted. Lorraine turned to Ling Xiang. What did Tsunami Chamber of Commerce say? He's enthroned. According to our agreement, we will follow it. We will fight with them shoulder by shoulder. We will give the newly elected master face. Otherwise, Minghao, Xianhe, and Frederick would blame us for not knowing how to behave. Ling Xiang's eyes were cunning as he said naturally, of course, we have to make them fight against the God Clan. And just like the time we had helped the God Clan that year, we will support them. However, we're smarter this time. We won't invest a lot of forces in this. Caesar and Lorraine nodded at the same time. Ling Xiang looked at the 3 boxes in front of them and said, we haven't figured out the power of these things. We should give them to him as proof of our sincere participation. It's best that they decode the secret of this power. Perhaps we can receive benefits from it too. Agreed. Agreed. Lorraine and Caesar agreed with him. Deep inside the blue clouds of the Fantasy Star was a hovering group of several warriors. In front of them was the area of the Fantasy Zone with countless illusions of the Fantasy Star underneath. A girl in the light green dress was hovering in the front. Her phoenix eyes were filled with murderous intent as she was waiting for something. Don't worry, Miss Xinging. Our Thousand Fantasy sect has sent people to pick them up. I think they will arrive soon, said an elegantly handsome young man. However, his hot eyes were deliberately scanning her slender back and ample rear end. He swallowed his saliva, his eyes lustful. Thinking about her wild and wanton characters last night, he couldn't control the heat in his body. He hated that he couldn't rip the dress off her body and put his body against hers one more time. Hafeng Deji, is there a problem? Xinging turned her head to look at him. The cold countenance vanished from her face. She smiled as bright as a flower and spoke softly. Some warriors of the Broken Hall got used to her ability to swiftly change her countenances. They didn't find it weird, though. I'm sure there's no problem. I've arranged it myself. I asked Banyu of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce to pick them up on his way here. I think they won't have some new trouble. Don't worry. I've arranged for them. I've sent the Fantasy Butterfly Troupe to get them. They should be here soon, confirmed the young man of the Thousand Fantasy sect. Hafeng Deji, you're so powerful, Xinging threw him a charming look. Hafeng laughed lustfully. His bright eyes gazed at her heavy breasts. Xinging was Xingming's daughter. Among the 3 forces, including the Thousand Fantasy sect, the Broken Hall, and Heaven River Temple, Xinging, Guling, and Cecilia were the famous flowers that many handsome and talented young men yearned for. Different from Guling and Cecilia, who kept their dignity, Xinging was famous as a promiscuous girl. She had love affairs with many young, handsome, and talented men of the 3 forces. The young men of the 3 forces thought that it was their glory to have transient relationships with Xinging. However, not any young man could do that. Only the young, handsome men with profound realms of the 3 forces could have a chance to observe her glamour. Hafeng had craved for Xingying's body for years. This time, Xinging had come to the Fantasy Star and requested him by chance. Finally, he had the chance to taste her. Even now, he still recalled their romantic moment. While Hafeng was still sinking in the sweet moment he had experienced last night, some beautiful, bright-colored butterflies appeared in their sights. They were as big as war chariots, but they were more elegant and tender. The warriors of the Thousand Fantasy sect were riding them. Surprisingly, Xing Shan and Wei Yun were sitting on one of those butterflies. Earlier, Xinging and Wei Yun had to run away helter-skelter to dodge billions of space fragments that Shi Yan had struck. Then, they contacted Xingying to tell her their situation. Hafeng had arranged the Fantasy Butterfly Troupe to pick them up. They had arrived at the Fantasy Star before Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's ships. According to the report of the Fantasy Butterfly Troupe, they knew that those billions of space fragments were just illusions because the Fantasy Butterfly's troops had told them that Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's ships were still heading to the Fantasy Star without a small scratch. Knowing this, Xing Shan and Wei Yun were so bitter. They clenched their jaws along the way here and thought about how to take revenge. Especially, they had ditched Ouyang Luo Shuang. Xing Ming had asked for this girl. They had messed up his business now. It made them tenser. Uncle, Xingying lifted her head to look at Xing Shan and Wei Yun riding the butterfly. She mocked and didn't try to be polite. Well, I heard that you found me another stepmother. Where is she? You've lost her even if she's chained by the primordial spirit lock? You're really good. You even asked me to send someone to pick you up. Well, you have my respect. Xing Shan grimaced. He knew how fierce this niece of his could be. Although he was sullen, he didn't dare to retort. You tell me what happened? Xingying snorted and turned to Wei Yun as she saw Xing Shan stay silent. Wei Yun stooped and forced a smile. He didn't dare to conceal and told her the situation. We don't know that kid, but we're sure he isn't from Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. As Tsunami Chamber of Commerce has violated the agreement by bringing some stranger here, and we're the long-term partner of the Thousand Fantasy Sect, we wanted to ask Tsunami Chamber of Commerce on behalf of the Thousand Fantasy Sect. We didn't think that we would create such a commotion. What did you say? He didn't respect our hall master, and he wanted to speak to him directly. Xingying shrieked as she heard half of the story. Her phoenix eyes were filled with rage. What is he? He dared to call our hall master's name? Wanton. We thought so. Wei Yun nodded and spoke faster. Oh well, you guys are really excellent. Xingying clapped her hands and coldly spoke to the other two. Two experts at the incipient god realm were teased by a kid. You've made our broken hall proud. I do admire you too. Xing Shan and Wei Yun discolored. They felt bitter, but they could only lower their head to listen to her. Xingying looked at them for a while and then snorted. Then, she changed her visage and turned to the young man next to her with a bright smile. She asked softly, Hafeng Deji, when will Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's ships arrive? Very soon, frowned Hafeng. From what Xing Shan and Wei Yun had told them, he knew that Tsunami Chamber of Commerce had violated their agreement by bringing some stranger to the adjacent area of the Fantasy Star. Patrolling the peripheral areas of the Fantasy Star was his family's duty. Hafeng was alarmed. He became more cautious. Are you sure he's not from Tsunami Chamber of Commerce? He asked Wei Yun. Ban Yu confirmed this. He told us that the young man isn't from Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. We're sure, said Wei Yun. Hafeng nodded, threw Xingying a look, and smiled. Miss Ng, you and I will wait here. We'll wait for Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's ships. If it's true, you can take the woman chained by the primordial spirit lock. We want to capture that stranger to interrogate him. After that, Miss Ng can do anything you want of him. What do you think about this? Xingying smiled brightly and threw him a lustful glance. I listen to you, Hafeng Deji. Hafeng smiled, his eyes were seductive and his stance out of the ordinary. Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's merchant ship. Ban Yu wore a cold face and walked to the closed cabin. He pondered for a while and then snorted coldly. We're about to get to the Fantasy Star. You should prepare. The broken hall will not let you go easily. You'd better leave early. He didn't mention that Hafeng had called him to pry on Shiyan's identity. Since Shiyan was here under the arrangement of Cold Iron City's manager, the manager Ban Yu had always respected, he knew his limit and he would never disclose the information. However, he didn't alarm Shiyan that the warriors of the Broken Hall and Thousand Fantasy Sect were waiting for him outside the Fantasy Star. They were guarding the tree stump and waiting for this rabbit. I won't bother you. When we get there, I will leave quickly. Ban Yu rubbed his nose and sneered coldly. He wanted to see if this young man could act casually when they got there. He had to stay under pressure from the Thousand Fantasy Sect and the Broken Hall. Shiyan opened his eyes to see Ouyang Luo Shuang with her clear eyes sitting next to him inside the closed cabin. Ouyang Luo Shuang was looking at him quietly too. During this time, they often looked at each other like that and vaguely found something in each other's eyes. Strangely, they could subtly understand each other that way. Chapter 1281. Posturing? Chapter 1281. Posturing, _ After many years of being away from each other, Ouyang Luo Shuang now had flawless, holy makings. It was because of her cultivating moonlight power Upanishad for a long time. Ouyang Luo Shuang used to be a cold and aloof woman. She was so distant to other people. However, after she got this pure, holy aura, she had become even more attractive. Perhaps it was her exquisite appearance and flawless makings that got her captured. To many men, those features of her were like a poison that they couldn't resist. To approach Shi Yan, Banyu had told him that Xing Ming had been a widower for many years. He was the sort of man who abandoned all kinds of restraint as he got the power from the broken hall. He often kidnapped beautiful women from different clans to enjoy. Recently, as his hope to break to the immortal realm was gone, his attention shifted to other things. He began to enjoy his life. Banyu had guessed that Xing Ming had laid his eyes on Ouyang Luo Shuang and plotted against her so Xing and Wei Yun could kidnap her. Shi Yan nodded in agreement with him as he could still recognize Ouyang Luo Shuang's special makings even though she was chained. After a while, Shi Yan pondered and then pointed at her white forehead. A beam of starlight radiated. Before the primordial spirit lock could react, he had retreated his energy. Shi Yan's eyes were strange when he frowned and thought quietly. The holy, flawless aura from Ouyang Luo Shuang was somehow familiar to him. It felt like he knew someone else with the same aura. He pulled himself together to search through his brain. After a while, he became bewildered, his face astounded. He understood it. When he was on Desolate, he had entered the strange lake and visited the incipient extent of the God Clan's precursor where there were moons, suns, and stars with a holy aura that he had sometimes found on Hague when he used the light power Upanishad. Rubbing his chin and looking at Ouyang Luo Shuang, Shi Yan sank in his thoughts. Tracing back to the origins of the moon, sun, and star power of the three god sect, Shi Yan knew it was from the God Clan, which were the other derivatives of the light power Upanishad. Being the moon god of the three god sect for many years, Ouyang Luo Shuang had cultivated the moonlight power Upanishad. At the same time, she used to fuse with a cold, incipient extent on Grace mainland. After she had entered the universe, her realm had become more exquisite. She would have new good encounters and understanding of her powers. As her power and realm had increased, her power Upanishad had the tendency to return to its original appearance. Shi Yan guessed that the holy aura she got now appeared as her realm had reached a specific height. Her power Upanishad had slowly returned to its original status, which reflected the power of the light Upanishad. Of course, it was just his personal assumption. It could be possible that Ouyang Luo Shuang had different encounters that led to the change of her power Upanishad and helped her approach the essence of the light power Upanishad. We're about to reach the Fantasy Star. After we get there, I'll find the Primordial Spirit Lock's key for you. Don't worry. I'll free you. I won't let them imprison you forever, said Shi Yan. Ouyang Luo Shuang looked at him quietly. He could see the reluctance in her eyes as if she didn't want him to go to the Fantasy Star to get himself killed with her. Banyu looked at the Fantasy Star that was getting clearer in his sight, his face stern. The peripheral areas of the Fantasy Star had many fulgent white light rings. They were the energy rivers with terrifying barriers that the Fantasy Star used to prevent the battleships from approaching. The Thousand Fantasy sect seldom depended on material wealth. It was the principle that Ling Xiang had set up. Although the Fantasy Star was the main planet of the Thousand Fantasy sect, there weren't many battleships or war chariots patrolling around it. The Thousand Fantasy sect favored the fantasy animals living in the fantasy zone. They used them as their traffic vehicles. The Fantasy Butterfly was a popular vehicle that was famous for its swift and agile characteristics. Many fantasy butterflies were moving around those white light rings. Each fantasy butterfly was as big as a war chariot and carried the Thousand Fantasy sect's warriors. In the past, the transport ships had to wait by the light rings. The Thousand Fantasy Sect's warriors rode their fantasy animals to transport the materials they had bought from Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. However, it was different today. The warriors of the Thousand Fantasy Sect didn't hover by the area that they usually were near. As soon as they saw the merchant ships, they scattered and surrounded the ships. "Sir, the Thousand Fantasy Sect is circling us. What should we do?" A warrior of Chamber of Commerce darkened his face, the flame of anger appearing in his eyes. Banyu also snorted. He wasn't wary of the others because Tsunami Chamber of Commerce had the foundation and confidence to deal with the Thousand Fantasy Sect. "Keep moving forward. Just let them circle us. Even if they have more guts, they won't dare to attack us." He turned around to see as he knew that the fantasy butterflies of the Thousand Fantasy Sect had come for the mysterious young man in the cabin. He knew that because he saw Xing Shan and Wei Yun riding the butterflies too. The warriors of Chamber of Commerce frowned and threw looks over their shoulders. They knew why the Thousand Fantasy Sect came. They thought that no matter what kind of identity or echelon Shurian had, he should leave the ship quickly. If he wanted to come to the Fantasy Star, he should leave the ship and enter the planet quietly from another location. Because Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's ships had a fixed route and unloading location, it was going to be pretty simple for the others to find him. For example, if he wanted to leave now, it would be too difficult already. "I'm Captain Feng Hao of the Fantasy Butterfly Troop of the Thousand Fantasy Sect. Friends from Chamber of Commerce, please stop your ships." Hao Feng's voice arose loudly. He looked at Banyu in the distance and nodded to greet him. Banyu frowned and snorted coldly. "We've not reached our destination yet. Keep moving forward." The warriors on the transport ships continued to move despite Hao Feng's request. Although the fantasy butterflies were hissing sharply, Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's ships forcefully thrust through their circle and kept moving forward to the Fantasy Star. They stopped when they reached the White Light Ring. This area was the place they usually anchored their ships. Hao Feng had forced them to stop earlier because he didn't want them to stay close to the Fantasy Star. Otherwise, when they created big commotions, they could alert the experts on the Fantasy Star, which would affect Hao Feng's promise to Xingying. Banyu didn't give him face. Hao Feng wore a cold and sinister face, but he didn't dare to attack Banyu. He continued to shout and make his butterflies maneuver and surround the 7 ships of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce once again. Then, he flew out of his butterfly and landed skillfully on Banyu's merchant ship. His line of sight fell directly on the closed cabin. At the same time, Xingying had brought Xing Shan and Wei Yun with about 10 ethereal god realm warriors of the Broken Hall to Banyu's ship. "I heard that you've violated the agreement. You brought a stranger on your ship to the Fantasy Star. Do you know what the consequences are?" Hao Feng sneered. Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's credit is what people have talked about the most in this vast universe. It's the reason why people trust you. You've proactively torn our agreement. I wonder how you will explain to the others. Xingying's phoenix eyes had a sinister light, her face caustic and mean. She had a cold and malicious aura of a serpent living in a dark and humid cave. Banyu was discontent with Shurian, but he also hated Hao Feng and Xingying. He snorted and then said, "Our Cold Iron City's manager has ordered this. I can't handle this situation. If you have doubts, go talk to your superior to talk to our city manager. I'm doing my job to bring him here." He didn't want to give them face. It seems that Tsunami Chamber of Commerce has become arrogant. "You think you can force people to buy your products? I'm going to tell my dad." "Let's see how your manager explains." Xingying's eyes were dark. "Well, as you wish," Banyu shrugged. He didn't even want to see her. He turned to the closed cabin, pondered, and then said, "As per our city manager's request, I only bring you to this area. We're not going to get involved in your business later." As he said that, Hao Feng, Xingying, Xing Shan, and Wei Yun were surprised a lot. As they saw that Banyu was being bold, they thought that Banyu wanted to protect Shurian. Anyway, Banyu was part of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's staff. If he wanted to protect Shurian, and it was what the superiors of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce wanted to do, it was going to be a big headache for them. They didn't expect that after being bold, Banyu would deny his relationship with Shurian. This sudden change had surprised them a lot. They felt that it inexplicable as they couldn't figure out what kind of relationship was between Banyu and Shurian. "Hey friend," You still want to hide? It's time to meet up, isn't it? Halfong was bewildered for a moment and then he reacted. Halfong could tell that if Banyu had proactively erased their relationship, this young man had no relationship to the Chamber of Commerce. Without Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's trouble, the area surrounding the Fantasy Star was Halfong's territory. What kind of game could Shuryen play here? He could rub or pinch the other as much as he pleased then. Halfong became excited discreetly. He wanted to capture Shuryen to interrogate him and hand him over to Xingying. After that, he could have another chance to enjoy Xingying's wild and passionate taste. Thinking about the marvelous romance awaiting him, Halfong's desire appeared in his eyes. He couldn't wait for more. Well, so you guys are the ones that the Thousand Fantasy Sect, Broken Hall, and Heaven River Temple have sent here to welcome me? Shuryen's cold and bold voice came from the closed room. Then, the door opened. Shuryen's brawny body like an imposing mountain appeared on the stone bed in the room. Xingying's and Halfong's eyes brightened. Xingying looked at Shuryen while Halfong eyed Ouyang Luo Shuang. Their eyes sparkled with magical light as they were so amazed. In Xingying's eyes, Shuryen with his hunky body, cold and tyrannical bearings was the best of men. He looked way manlier than any young and handsome man she used to sleep with. Her heart suddenly felt itchy and she couldn't hold it down. At the same time, Ouyang Luo Shuang without her veil and with her exquisite face, her holy, flawless aura had attracted Halfong deeply. This pair of adulterers had eyed Shuryen and Ouyang Luo Shuang right after the door opened, and they couldn't get their eyes off the other two. They had almost forgotten the reason why they came here. While they were still baffled, Shuryen strode out of the room and said coldly, "Even if Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine didn't come to welcome me personally, they should let Gulian, Xingming, or Lina come here." Well, the Thousand Fantasy Sect, the Broken Hall, and the Heaven River Temple don't have the right manners. They let some juniors come to welcome me. I want to hear Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine's explanation then. Chapter 1282, Overbearing. Chapter 1282, Overbearing, _. Listening to him, Xingying and Halfong pulled themselves together, their eyes so strange. Banyu snorted and sneered inwardly. Well, just continue to posture. Let's see how long you can pretend. Ouyang Luo Shuang sighed and forced a smile. Her bright eyes looked reluctant as she thought, so you think you can scare everybody? You've deceived Xing Shang and Wei Yun once. Do you think you can trick them one more time? The warriors of the Broken Hall and Thousand Fantasy Sect wore cold faces and looked at him, their murderous aura shooting into the air. Who keeps the key of the Primordial Spirit Lock? Shuryen walked out of the room, looking at Xing Shang and talking arrogantly. She and I have a deep relationship. Give me the key. I'll talk to Caesar about this myself. Xing Shang's face grimaced. He couldn't hold it anymore and he shouted, "Shut up. Don't fight on my ship." Banyu intervened and frowned. If you damage our ships, you have to compensate. If you want to fight, please choose another area. The Thousand Fantasy Sect, Broken Hall, and Heaven River Temple have invited me here. Is this how you treat the distinguished guest? Shuryen snorted and said coldly, "All right, it seems like I need to find your superiors on the Fantasy Star to talk about this." He extended one hand to grab Ouyang Luo Shuang's sleeve to avoid physical contact with her that would activate the Primordial Spirit Lock. He held her sleeve and dragged her out of Banyu's merchant ship as if he didn't see the warriors of the Thousand Fantasy Sect and Broken Hall around watching him. He wanted to head to the Fantasy Star directly. Xing Shang and Wei Yun moved and stood in his way. At the same time, Xingying and Halfong had signaled the warriors of the Thousand Fantasy Sect and the Broken Hall to ride the fantasy butterflies to block his way. "Sir?" The warrior on Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's ship couldn't help but ask their captain. Banyu shook his head, implying that they shouldn't interfere with their business. "We're responsible for transporting the materials that the Thousand Fantasy Sect ordered. We shouldn't care about the other stuff. Just stand and watch them." His warriors stood silently, their heads stooped. The Thousand Fantasy Sect wanted to capture Shuryen first and receive the materials from the transport ships later. Thus, Banyu's team didn't dare to leave. They had to wait until this event finished. Banyu and Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's warriors looked at Shuryen, who was surrounded. They had to stay alert to see how the situation would develop. Shuryen was still flying like a dumb fool who wasn't afraid of the power of the Thousand Fantasy Sect and the Broken Hall. Xing Shang smiled darkly. He opened his mouth and spurted out a blue lightning ball. This lightning ball was created from billions of lightning bolts. The sharp electrical beam sizzled with Xing Shang's pure soul consciousness. The lightning ball was massive with domineering power, and it was aimed at Shuryen's chest. "I want him alive." Xingying suddenly smiled, her lusty eyes watery and her mouth parting erotically. Xing Shang's face stiffened as he cursed his slutty niece under his breath. He had to change his attack midway. The massive lightning ball then turned into a thick mesh lightning net that stretched towards Shuryen and attempted to capture him. He knew that his niece and his cousin Xing Ming had the same character. They were really into the stuff between a man and a woman. As he had made mistakes this time, he didn't dare to offend Xingying. He could only follow her order and fulfill her wish. He had to capture Shuryen so his niece could have fun with this hunky man. Xing Shang felt so bitter and worried. At first, he had followed Xing Ming's order to kidnap Ouyang Luo Shuang, and right now, he had to serve Xingying and capture Shuryen. It made the second sky of incipient god realm expert, the #1 character in the Broken Hall like him, feel so resentful that he wanted to vomit blood. But he had to do that. "It's your Broken Hall who started to attack me first. Later on, when Caesar comes, don't blame me for having no mercy," Shuryen suddenly sneered. Banyu looked further ahead and shook his head with a dark face. He thought that this man was about to die, but he was still talking boastfully. Did he really think that he could create an imaginary relationship with Caesar with some sentences to scare Xing Shang of the Broken Hall? He doesn't want to live anymore. Ouyang Luo Shuang had the same thought. She had soon recognized that Shuryen had only first sky of incipient god realm cultivation base, one level lower than Xing Shang. She also knew that Xing Shang wasn't weak. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been captured. Thus, she became more desperate as she thought that Shuryen had just been posturing. While the people here were cold and indifferent and waiting to see Shuryen embarrass himself, Shuryen took action. He rose one arm and grabbed Xing Shang's neck despite the space and distance between them as if he didn't see the lightning net snatching over him. The strange situation happened abruptly. It was obvious that his arm was too far away from Xing Shang. However, as soon as he rose his arm, the space between him and Xing Shang shortened instantly. After just a blink of an eye, people found that it looked like Xing Shang was too puzzled. It seemed like he proactively craned his neck so Shuryen could grab him. It was so bizarre. Layers of space energy waves emerged at Shuryen's fingertips that helped him close the distance and grip Xing Shang's neck before his lightning net reached Shuryen. Quickly, Xingying's face reddened, his eyes bulging and his face extremely panic-stricken. The lightning net that was about to snatch over him was erased by Xing Shang himself when Shuryen's eye met his. In that short moment, the vicious Xing Shang, the second sky of incipient god realm, had his neck grabbed by a young man that had forced him to cancel his attack. Banyu, Xingying, Hao Feng, and Ouyang Luo Shuang were amazed. They thought that it was so unreal. It was as if they saw a ghost in daylight. The warriors of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce rubbed their eyes instinctively. They thought that they were dizzy. However, the scene didn't change afterward. Shuryen was grabbing Xing Shang by his neck. Xing Shang looked so frightened as he tried to pull Shuryen's hand to get rid of his strangler. But he couldn't do that. Xing Shang's legs were wiggling like a pig lifted to the air, waiting to be slaughtered. He looked so helter-skelter. He was so embarrassed. However, Xing Shang didn't have any extra bit of effort to think about his reputation. He was filled with fear. Because all of his powers, including the qi of his blood body, his soul energy, and his god power were being drained little by little from the moment Shuryen had grabbed his neck. It was some sort of unrecoverable outflow. He understood clearly and fear crept over him. This feeling of his energy being drained weakened him slowly and made him edgy. He was about to collapse. He knew how strenuous it was for him to reach his realm and cultivation base today. He had let others humiliate him to receive the precious cultivating materials from Xingming. He had to kidnap beautiful women for Xingming. He had even acted servilely to his niece, Xingying. To be strong, he had to struggle a lot. He was so wary of the time without power. He knew that once his realm was reduced, he wouldn't be able to keep the position in the Broken Hall, even if Xingming took care of him. He was so afraid. He was afraid that this vision would happen. With power, he had taken steps to come to this day. He understood better than anyone else that without the intimidating power to survive, he was nothing. You keep the key of the primordial spirit lock? Shiyan gazed at Xing Shang and asked indifferently as if he didn't recognize Xing Shang's fear or the shock on the others' faces. Xing Shang choked painfully, his face so red that it looked like it could bleed in any minute. He shook his head and struggled continuously. He had tried to let his soul altar fly out of his body. However, as soon as his soul moved, it was struck. Countless flows of sinister, desperate souls invaded his soul instantaneously. He was so scared as if he was about to be buried. He hastened to stop his deed. So you keep it? Shiyan was surprised. He turned to ask Wei Yun. Wei Yun shook his head, his face panic-stricken. No, I don't have it. Really, I don't have it. Buddy, you dare to attack the others in our Thousand Fantasy Sects territory. You didn't care about our Thousand Fantasy Sects reputation. Don't blame us for not showing mercy. While Hao Feng was talking, he retreated and gave the signal to an incipient god realm of the Thousand Fantasy sect on his side. The man became stern as he said, Your space power Upanishad is really excellent. Little friend, you must be the mysterious expert of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. Only the strong forces like Tsunami Chamber of Commerce could have elite experts with space power Upanishad. Please give the Thousand Fantasy sect face once. Release Xing Shang. Our Thousand Fantasy sect will solve this seriously. Sir, is he one of us? The warriors of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce couldn't help but look at Banyu. Banyu frowned, his face astounded. He wasn't so sure about this. In this vast sea of stars, most of the warriors with profound space power Upanishad had been recruited by Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. Although Shiyan didn't admit that he was a member of Chamber of Commerce, come to think about it, Banyu had received the order from Cold Iron City's manager to deliver Shiyan to the Fantasy Star. Also, he was pretty young with the high attainment of space power Upanishad. These signs showed that Shiyan could become a real member of the Chamber of Commerce. Banyu tried to know Shiyan's real identity. All of a sudden, he remembered one expert and his face changed immediately. Are you Sir DeCarlos' son? Banyu suddenly shouted. He was startled and he spoke resolutely, Oh right. Sir DeCarlos is the important consecrator of the Chamber of Commerce. He has built so many marvelous space teleport formations. He said that he wanted to train his children, so he has left the position for several years recently. Is it true that he's done his best to train you? While he was talking about DeCarlos, his face was so respectful as he thought it was true. DeCarlos was a special expert in Tsunami Chamber of Commerce that even the president had to respect him a lot. In the cosmos, his reputation was well spread. He was best known as the expert with the first space power Upanishad. DeCarlos had built many complex teleport formations on the Tsunami Star. Banyu thought that if Shiyan was one of DeCarlos' children, he wouldn't need to be afraid of the Thousand Fantasy sect or the Broken Hall. It was because DeCarlos had befriended with Bloodthirsty. At the same time, DeCarlos had helped Imperial Dark Tribe and Heavenly Monster Tribe to build the space teleport formations. He was a sage with supernatural powers and an extraordinary position in this vast universe. Hearing Banyu shout, Hao Feng and the incipient god realm expert of the Thousand Fantasy sect together with Xing and her Broken Hall's warriors had to change their visages. When they looked at Shiyan once again, their faces were strange as if they were really afraid of DeCarlos. They felt as if their hands were tied. Sir DeCarlos is the important consecrator of our Chamber of Commerce. Although he doesn't admit that he's our member, we always consider him as one of us. Of course, his family members are our Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's members too. You guys, you know what to do now, right? Banyu suddenly hissed. Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's warriors shouted to reply to him. They rode the war chariots, flew out, and prepared to engage in this battle. Chapter 1283, My Woman. Chapter 1283, My Woman, _ The participation of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's warriors had troubled the warriors of the Thousand Fantasy sect and the Broken Hall more. They felt that their hands tied upon seeing Shiyan keeping Xing Shang as the hostage. Banyu had confirmed that Shiyan was the descendant of DeCarlos, which had made his identity heavier. DeCarlos had a good relationship with Bloodthirsty, Dark Imperial Tribe, and Heavenly Monster Tribe. It meant that the Thousand Fantasy sect and the Broken Hall couldn't offend him. Xing Shang was captured. What should they do? Xing Ying and Hao Feng felt terrible headaches. Shiyan was so surprised. He had never heard about the expert called DeCarlos. He was bewildered when Banyu sounded so sure that he was DeCarlos' descendant. However, he didn't try to make it clear. He maintained his grip on Xing Shang and spoke coldly, "Give me the key of the Primordial Spirit Lock if you want him back." As Ouyang Luoshuang's sleeve was chained with a tender starlight, she stood upright by Shiyan. Although she couldn't move or talk, her pure, elegant makings were so attractive. Her clear eyes were so mesmerizing that they rippled with beautiful lights. She was also frightened. In the past years, she had been wandering around the vast universe alone. She had a better knowledge. She knew the name of this first consecrator of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, DeCarlos. She knew that he was a master of space power Upanishad. It could be said that his attainment in understanding space power Upanishad was the best in this cosmos. Shiyan was DeCarlos' child. Ouyang Luoshuang was astounded, but she was more skeptical because she knew that Shiyan was from Grace Mainland, and when she was in their homeland, she had never heard about the name DeCarlos. She checked his expression and found that he was also surprised. Ouyang Luoshuang understood it immediately. Banyu had misunderstood and Shiyan was just posturing. She didn't know whether to cry or smile. However, hope rose in her heart. She knew the truth, but the Thousand Fantasy sect and the Broken Hall didn't. Neither did Banyu. With DeCarlos' reputation and Xing Shang under hostage, she might have a chance to be rescued. "We don't have the key to the Primordial Spirit Lock. We can't give it to you." Xing Ying was struck. She pondered and then said mildly, "How about this? We're going to the Fantasy Star first. I will find my father to get the key and give it to you. Can you give me more time?" Shiyan shrugged and spoke casually, "Maybe." Then, he used the star energy to bring Ouyang Luoshuang with him while his other hand still held onto Xing Shang. He began to fly towards the Fantasy Star's territory. Currently, Xing Shang's face was grimaced and as purple as pig liver. He continuously blinked at Xing Ying in the hope that Xing Ying would help him or rescue him. Xing Ying acted as if she didn't see his signals. Since Banyu had confirmed Shiyan's identity as the later generation of DeCarlos, Hao Feng and the Thousand Fantasy sect's warriors didn't dare to act rashly. They kept silent and indifferent. "He's the descendant of an important consecrator in our Chamber of Commerce. We shouldn't enter the Fantasy Star. But I'm afraid it will be an exception this time. After we make it clear, we will leave." Banyu sounded bold. He signaled the warriors of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce on the war chariots to follow Shiyan to the Fantasy Star. "Wait a minute. It's an important matter. I have to report it first." The incipient God Realm expert of the Thousand Fantasy sect accompanying Hao Feng finally recognized that something was wrong. He didn't want to let Hao Feng act on his own. He had to take it seriously as it was his responsibility to patrol the outer layer of the Fantasy Star. "Sure," Banyu nodded. Everybody turned to Shiyan. Shiyan grinned and then turned his grin into a strange, bright smile. "You'd better report it to Ling Xiang directly. Otherwise, it will be hard to solve then." The expert changed his face in fear. He found that it had become even more strange. Instinctively, he thought that something was so wrong. Shiyan was too calm. When the Thousand Fantasy sect and Broken Hall surrounded him and threatened him, he didn't look scared or panicked at all. His calmness was odd to them. From their experiences, this kind of performance belonged to two kinds of people, the pathetic and dumb, and those with strong backgrounds. This expert could see that Shiyan wasn't stupid at all. Thus, there was only one possibility now. He wasn't afraid of anyone from the Thousand Fantasy sect or the Broken Hall. This conclusion had scared the expert. He originally thought that he should contact Hao Feng's superior. But now, he changed his mind. He decided to report directly to the sect master. Please wait up here. His attitude became more respectful. He bent his body slightly and then turned around to get some distance from Shi Yan before using his secret method of contacting Ling Xiang. Hao Feng, Xingying, and Banyu looked shocked as they couldn't comprehend what was happening. Especially Hao Feng. He knew this expert held a high position in the Thousand Fantasy sect. Unless he was meeting his peers like Lina and Xingming, he wasn't so cautious or respectful. As he treated Shi Yan this way, it spoke up the fact that he had considered Shi Yan's position like Lina or Xingming. Hao Feng was scared. He regretted his rash acts as he knew he had stepped on needles this time. Xingying's beautiful face was uncertain. She coldly snarled and glared at Wei Yun. You guys have done good things this time. Banyu looked relaxed and waited. When he looked at Shi Yan, he smiled. Hao Feng, Xingying, and Banyu assumed that Shi Yan was the later generation of DeCarlos as they thought that it was the reason why he wasn't afraid of the Thousand Fantasy sect, Broken Hall, and Heaven River Temple. He wasn't afraid of their punishment. Right when they were chasing their own thoughts, the incipient God Realm expert who had contacted Ling Xiang suddenly said something that made them completely perplexed. The man turned around, his face frightened. Master has ordered us to wait here. He will come with Master Caesar and Master Lorraine. Even the expert himself was shocked. He looked at Shi Yan as if he was something really incredible. Banyu, Hao Feng, Xingying, and Wei Yun gawked as they couldn't catch up with the situation. At their positions, Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine didn't need to welcome Shi Yan, DeCarlos' children, or even DeCarlos himself. Moreover, the three of them came here together. In this vast sea of stars, who was qualified to make the three of them welcome him personally? The God Clan's chief. The matriarch of Imperial Dark Tribe. Xingying and Wei Yun paled. They were restlessly anxious. Hao Feng's face was sour as he regretted his actions so much. Ouyang Luo Shuang thought she was dreaming. She looked at Shi Yan, her heart beating frantically. She found that she had underestimated Shi Yan and his mysteries. Banyu was puzzled. He rubbed his chin, his face strange. He didn't know the reason why, either. He understood that even if Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's president came here, he wouldn't have such a welcoming delegation. While they were still baffled, Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine came together. Gulian, Xingming, and Lina, the managers with real powers of the Thousand Fantasy sect, Broken Hall, and Heaven River Temple also accompanied them. Ha ha ha. As soon as Ling Xiang arrived, he laughed cheerily, his voice filled with joy. You do give me face. As soon as you've enthroned, you come to visit my fantasy star. It's our honor. However, before you arrived, you didn't notify us of the exact time. That's why we couldn't arrange earlier to welcome you properly. We feel embarrassed, though. Ling Xiang's team had discussed and decided to give Shi Yan face to eliminate his guard and help them smoothen everything. Thus, they all came to give him a good impression to fulfill what they had discussed. In their eyes, Shi Yan was very young, so if they treated him well and gave him the respect he deserved, they could persuade him. Banyu, Hao Feng, Xingying, Wei Yun, and Ouyang Luo Shuang, of course, didn't know Ling Xiang's plan. They didn't know that they came here personally with some other purpose. Thus, all the warriors of the Thousand Fantasy sect, Broken Hall, and Thousand Fantasy sect outside the Fantasy Star became dead silent after they heard Ling Xiang's voice. They all gazed at Shi Yan now. They were all dumbfounded. They had a big question in their heads that filled their minds and occupied the room of their other thoughts. Who was this man? Xing Shang was still struggling. It was his limitation. He tried to wiggle and make noise to attract people's attention. Who is this? Caesar frowned, his voice low-pitched. A subordinate of my hall. Why did he offend you, sir? Shi Yan threw a look at Banyu and asked, You explain it to him. Banyu was bewildered. He was still sinking in this big suspicion. As Caesar and Shi Yan were watching him, he bent slightly and narrated the situation. Caesar snorted and glanced at Xingming standing behind him, his eyes so sharp. Xingming lowered his head, sweat beading his forehead. He didn't even dare to retort. Although Caesar had almost ignored the matters of the broken hall, Xingming knew how terrifying Caesar was. At the immortal realm and with a cultivation base, it would be a piece of cake if Caesar wanted to kill him. Xingming had depended on Caesar's name to do many things. Well, I don't think our broken hall needs your permission to capture 1 or 2 people, sir. If she's your friend, it's our mistake. But I heard from Banyu that you guys, Caesar frowned. He hadn't finished. His face was still stretched. Caesar, the warrior who was obsessed with martial arts, was also famous for his bold and cold characteristics, but now he looked so surprised. Many warriors surrounding were shocked, their faces weird. Because at this moment, Shi Yan suddenly released Xingying and pulled Ouyang Luo Shuang, embracing her perfect body. He then placed a kiss on her succulent lips. His kiss was rude and strong that everyone could see clearly. After that, he didn't care about the anger and embarrassment in Ouyang Luo Shuang's eyes. He just nodded to Caesar and said, "She's my woman." His voice was tyrannical and overbearing. He had surprised many women around. They looked dizzy and passionate because of him. Xingying felt her body get very hot. Even Lena and Lorraine were baffled. They blushed, their eyes strange. "All right, it's our broken hall's mistake. My apologies. I'm sorry for not controlling my subordinates well. I hope they didn't trouble you too much, sir." Caesar was also an overlord of a big force, but he resolutely admitted the mistake. Then, he looked at Xingming brutally and snorted, "Do you need me to teach you what to do?" Chapter 1284, Who is he after all? Chapter 1284, Who is he after all? No need, sir. Xingming stooped, bending and handing the key of the Primordial spirit lock. He clasped his hand and spoke to Shi Yan sincerely. "I didn't know that this lady is your woman. Please show mercy. My cousin was wrong this time. We will give you a proper explanation." He looked at Xing Shang, pondered, and then talked, "Chop off one hand." Xing Shang paled, his mouth twitching. He wanted to cry, but he couldn't. Xingming's eyes were so cold and sinister as he had him. Xing Shang shivered and gritted his teeth. He then took out a sharp knife and chopped off his left arm. The pain from the cut made him crouch. "Sir, is it okay now?" Xingming looked at Shi Yan. All of them looked at Shi Yan. Banyu, Hao Feng, and Xingying discolored. Seeing Xing Shang cut his arm, they felt like it was a sharp saber cutting their bodies. They could even feel the pain, and their minds were so tense. "Hold on. I need to make it clear." Shi Yan didn't change his visage as if he didn't mind that Xing Shang chopped off his arm. He received the key and used the method Banyu had told him to unlock the Primordial spirit lock. The Primordial spirit lock had a notch, which was the keyhole. Shi Yan inserted the key and sent a beam of his god power. After a cracking sound, the Primordial spirit lock was unchained, and the wisp of soul confined inside the chain returned into Ouyang Luo Shuang's head as an invisible snake, merging with her host's soul. After she was unchained, the first thing Ouyang Luo Shuang did was throw Shi Yan a resentful glare. Then, she still stood by him, her face friendly to him. She knew that it was Shi Yan's words that said that she was his woman who had returned her freedom to her and cut off Xing Sheng's one arm. If she wanted to maintain her freedom one more time, she had to continue playing her role. Thus, she could only stick to Shi Yan. Her exquisite face became shy although she was cursing Shi Yan under her breath. He had seized the chance to bully her, but she could only go with his flow. "Little Shuang, what do you think?" Shi Yan said gently. After Shi Yan said that, he could feel Ouyang Luo Shuang's body that was sticking to his side stiffen. Shi Yan sneered inwardly, but his face was still serious and his voice was tender. "Little Shuang, if it's not enough, it's okay to cut his other arm." He threw a glance to Xing Shang. Xing Shang felt a chill run down his spine. Even his veins were shivering. Ouyang Luo Shuang looked at Xing Shang then Xingming, her eyes cold. She talked indifferently. "You don't need to be bothered with that. I can move now, but I can't contact my teacher. He will take revenge for me." Yen was bewildered. Caesar's team was also baffled. Then they laughed casually as if they didn't mind Ouyang Luo Shuang's words much. Sir, please go to the Fantasy Star. Ling Xiang smiled and nodded to the incipient God Realm expert who had reported to him on the event as he thought they were done here. Hao Feng isn't suitable to the Fantasy Butterfly Troops, Captain. You go and talk to his seniors. The other nodded and regarded him respectfully. From a distance, Hao Feng's face turned ash-brown. Now, he had only reluctant despair in his eyes. He knew what Ling Xiang had said was similar to a death sentence to him. He could never rise again in the Thousand Fantasy Sect. He looked at Yen leaving, his heart filled with regret and bitter thoughts. He knew that he could never take revenge against Yen. This guy was a character that their sect master had to come and welcome personally. Hao Feng and his family could only stand with their heads lowered. If they dared to protest, they were going to be erased from the Thousand Fantasy Sect. He could only swallow this bitter fruit and forget this event. Different from Hao Feng, Xingying's eyes were bright as she was so obsessed with Yen. Her lusty desire churned in her heart. In her eyes, Yen was cold and haughty, which was the traits of the most perfect man in this world. If she could have one night with this sort of man, even if she had to die, it would be worth it. She had put Hao Feng, the one who had one hot night with her, out of her mind already. She didn't even look at Hao Feng in his distress. She didn't give him a word to console him. She directly walked away and swung her hips from side to side. She walked to Xingming, her father, without giving the other a glance. To her, Hao Feng was now just someone in the past. I know from Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's president that you would come here. That's why Caesar and Lorraine are here to wait for you. I'm so sorry you have to experience some little trouble. Along the way, Ling Xiang smiled, deliberately led ahead, giving his apology to Yen. Caesar, Lorraine, and Lena moved by him. This group of people crossed the white light ring outside the Fantasy Star and landed directly on the Fantasy Star's land. Xingming, Gulian, and Banyu stayed behind. They didn't follow them. Banyu, you guys have a rough trip this time. Stay and rest on our Fantasy Star. I will send someone to receive the materials on the ships. You guys come here with us. Gulian invited Tsunami Chamber of Commerce's staff after she had received Ling Xiang's secret signal. As Banyu was so curious about Yen's identity, Gulian's invitation suited him well. He agreed immediately. Oh, then I have to bother you. The items you ordered are on the ships. Just like many previous times, please check and receive them. Ban. Okay, I'll handle it. Gulian smiled, taking Banyu and some High Realm warriors of Chamber of Commerce to follow Ling Xiang, Yen, and Ouyang Luo Shuang to the Fantasy Star. Hao Feng kept his head low and said nothing. He rode the fantasy butterfly and left, his shadow lonely. Xingying didn't notice him leaving. She pretended to know nothing and said to Xingsheng, Uncle, don't blame my father. It's the Hall Master's order. We couldn't do anything. You should rest well. After this thing is settled, I'm sure I can heal your limb. You've been troubled this time. I will remember this. I won't mistreat you. Xingming hadn't left yet to comfort Xingsheng. He used the sincere words to ensure he would recover Xingsheng's cut limb to prevent the man from keeping a grudge against him. Xingming didn't have power as intimidating as Caesar's. He knew himself well. He understood that if he wanted to keep his position in the Broken Hall, he had to have strong subordinates. To achieve what he had today, it was all because of his excellent interpersonal skills. I just want to know who he is. Xingsheng's wound had stopped bleeding. He quivered, his face pale. Hearing him, Xingying, Wei Yun, and the other Broken Hall's warriors gathered their spirits and looked at Xingming curiously. It was the biggest doubt in their hearts. Who was Yen after all? He's the new master of the bloodthirsty force. He got the Genesis fruit. If nothing unexpected happens, he will become the real overlord of this cosmos in the next 10,000 years. Xingming sighed and then comforted Xingsheng. It's our bad luck this time. But it's good that he doesn't care about it anymore. You'll be all right. Right. Because he just enthroned, our master will give him face. It's because if he can survive and inherit the power of that man, he will influence people in a short time. Xinging, Xingshang, and Wei Yun were frightened, their faces pale. No wonder. Xingshang sounded sad. Bloodthirsty Force was the force that used to be stronger than the God Clan. Their brutal name was heard in every corner of the world. After 10,000 years, since Shi Yan got the Genesis fruit, the rumor that the Bloodthirsty Force was about to rise again had spread out in this entire universe. All the forces in the vast sea of stars had thought that only the Bloodthirsty Force could stand shoulder by shoulder with the God Clan. They were going to replace the God Clan and become the main characters of the cosmos in the coming 10,000 years. They had never thought that they would be in bad luck after they had provoked the future overlord of the universe. Xingshang and Wei Yun could only accept their misfortune. Xinging had starlight sparkle in her eyes. Shi Yan was very attractive to her. And now, because of his echelon and position, he was even hotter to her. She had to grab every chance she had to get this man. She must have him at any cost. She had made up her mind. Outside the fantasy zone. It was a chaotic, broken space with 6 massive meteorites that created strange energy fields like 6 rivers congregated. A beautiful star nucleus like the moonlight zoomed over from a far distance, falling toward the 6 meteorites. A lazy-looking man was sitting on that nucleus and drinking fragrant wine and sparkling fruits. He slowly landed. This man had narrow, phoenix eyes, and the contours on his face were so tender and soft like feminine characteristics. His makings were like supple water, which was really strange. The man wore a loose robe that could be found anywhere. However, his sleeves were really wide, as if he kept the endless supernatural power in there. The moon nucleus he was riding was the essence of the bright moon from a lunar star he had recently refined. It was the tool he had prepared for his student to cultivate. This area was the place he and his student had agreed to meet up. After he had landed, the lazy looking on his face disappeared. The holy light shot out from his eyes and illuminated the place. It then projected the situation that had happened here. Slowly, his face became sinister. He snorted. Those people from the broken hall dared to force my student. They should know how high the sky is. Then, he touched the moon nucleus. Billions of moonlight beams shot out like silver needles that were extremely sharp. Puff, puff. In just a blink of an eye, the 6 meteorites exploded. Their fragments bombarded the fantasy zone massively. They created a fierce tornado twirling around the fantasy zone. Many warriors who of the 1,000 fantasy sect operating around the fantasy zone were in danger. The man's flame of rage had troubled them a lot. Many ethereal god realm experts were killed violently. The tornado was created inside the fantasy zone. It attacked around and then headed to the fantasy star. Eventually, the white light rings protecting the fantasy star had stopped them. And that man was riding the moon nucleus, maliciously charged around violently. He had killed a lot of fantasy animals in his way. As easily as if he was breaking dry trees, he stormed straight to the host star of the 1,000 fantasy sect. In the Blood Sea Forbidden Land. A flow of Ming Hao's soul stormed into Frederick's palace on the Corpse Chi Island. Frederick and Xian he were discussing important matters. Seeing Ming Hao's soul coming, they didn't look happy. Ming Hao's floating soul moved around and said sternly, "Something has changed. I received the news that Carefree has arrived at the Fantasy Star." Listening to him, Xian he and Frederick discolored. They jolted up from their seats. Xian he and Frederick knew the name Carefree well. Knowing that he was on the Fantasy Star, they changed their countenances and immediately began to prepare their arrangement. Chapter 1285, An Ambiguous Relationship. Chapter 1285, An Ambiguous Relationship, _. The islet in the middle of the lake on the Fantasy Star. Ling Xiang brought Shi Yan to the islet while smiling. "I've been staying here and cultivating ascetically for years. I've sent my love to the beauty of nature. I've almost forgotten the truth of power." Caesar, Lorraine, and Lena paid attention to see how Shi Yan would reply. In this vast universe, the deep meanings of power Upanishads appear everywhere. If you want it very much, you can see it. A stupid person can't locate a gold mine, even if he's sitting on it. Shi Yan stood in between the bamboo pavilions. While taking a deep breath, his face was strange. This place is the soul of the fantasy star, the most marvelous place of the planet. It's really incredible. Where is it incredible? Ling Xiang tried to test him. Everywhere. Shi Yan looked around. The mountains, the bamboo pavilions, the fish and shrimps over there. I can't tell if they are real or not. Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine exchanged looks. They nodded discreetly. This place was the soul of the fantasy star. It was also the reason why the fantasy star had the word fantasy in its name. Even the strange conditions that had created the fantasy zone was related to this place. The beautiful and natural scenery here was real, but it could change at any moment. It was so inexplicable. The mountains, rivers, and spirit animals in this area should be the things from your incipient extent. Their existences depend on your thoughts. At the same time, this place has layers of spaces. They aren't your incipient extent, but they cross your incipient extent, and your incipient extent is just a layer of space among those spaces. Right? Shi Yan was shaken all of a sudden. He turned to ask Ling Xiang, his face amazed. Hearing him, Ling Xiang's team was very surprised. Shi Yan could recognize that this place was the soul of the planet and the scenery here wasn't real. Coming to this conclusion was extraordinary. They didn't think that he could even tell that the surroundings were unreal and from Ling Xiang's incipient extent. Closing his eyes to sense for a while, he told them that Ling Xiang's incipient extent was one layer of the layers of space here. It wasn't something that other experts could discover. When Lina and Xingming came here, they could only figure out the first thing. They weren't able to find the second discovery that Shi Yan had just done. You didn't fail your new position as the master. With only the incipient god realm, you can see a lot of things. Caesar nodded and sincerely complimented him. Your eyes are keen, indeed. It seems like the god clan will receive a lot of trouble this time. Lorraine smiled naturally. Ouyang Luo Shuang stood by Shi Yan. She just walked close to him and said nothing. At this moment, moonlight gushed out of her bright eyes and fell to her feet. A magical transformation appeared. The moonlight from her eyes was like a strong acid that began to erode the tranquil mountains and lakes, changing this world rapidly. The world that was created with layers of illusions was washed under the moonlight from her eyes. Shortly after, the real world appeared in their sights. Now, they were standing in the middle of many mountain ranges and massive ancient trees in front of grand palaces. Those palaces were built out of large rocks. They looked thick, heavy, and simple even though they gave people a majestic impression, making them respectful and subdued. This was the real scene. The moonlight in her eyes had torn the illusions and revealed the reality. Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine wore odd faces and studied Ouyang Luo Shuang as if they had found something really marvelous. Little girl, who is your teacher? Lorraine suddenly remembered what Ouyang Luo Shuang had said. Her teacher would come to take revenge for her. At that time, Lorraine didn't mind it. But now, she had a vague, insecure feeling. The magical moonlight Ouyang Luo Shuang had released gave her a familiar feeling. She thought she had seen it before, but the memory of the one who had shown this ability was a long time ago, so it had faded. If she wasn't wrong, Ouyang Luo Shuang's teacher was a domineering and intimidating expert. He could be from the same generation as Lorraine's teacher. Ling Xiang and Caesar were bewildered. They looked contemplating as they gazed at Ouyang Luo Shuang. They could sense a magical and holy aura from Ouyang Luo Shuang and her power. They also felt familiar with that aura. However, for the time being, they couldn't remember. You two had encountered many unpleasant events along the way. Please rest today. We will discuss important matters tomorrow. Ling Xiang hadn't confirmed Ouyang Luo Shuang's identity, so he had to make more time to discuss it with Caesar and Lorraine. He needed to have the right attitude on this matter. Shi Yan thought that it wasn't a big deal, so he said, "It's good then. Little Ling, you should come and arrange the accommodations for our distinguished guests." Ling Xiang smiled and made his voices pitch higher intentionally. Guling flew out from the thick forest behind them. Her eyes were bright and lively. She didn't look happy, though. "You guys follow me. Little Ling is my adopted daughter. Her father was my sworn brother. Unfortunately, he had passed away when he was still young." Ling Xiang explained, his eyes having a sad gleam. Shi Yan gave a slight nod. Guling wore a cold face, snorted, and led the way. She walked directly to a spacious palace. Shi Yan threw a glance at Ouyang Luo Shuang. Oh looked calm and relaxed. She came near him and walked with him behind Guling. What do you think about him? Ling Xiang turned around and asked when he saw Shi Yan and Ouyang Luo Shuang leaving, his eyes absent-minded. Extraordinary and keen eyes. Although his realm is still low right now, he will thrive quickly with the supernatural power of Bloodthirsty, answered Lorraine. Not that simple. With Bloodthirsty's terrifying power Upanishad, he doesn't need to worry about collecting power. However, he still needs to take steps to understand his realm. Lena shook her head. I'm at peak of incipient god realm, just a step away from the immortal realm. However, this step has troubled me for 2,000 years. Lacking the realm's understanding will hold back the realm even if I have enough pure power to break through. Caesar, what do you think? Asked Ling Xiang. He defeated Harson and Haig. That proves his innate talents. He is stronger than the other two. In addition to Bloodthirsty's special power Upanishads, I think they make his future extraordinarily bright, said Caesar. I agree with Caesar. If this kid can survive, he will be an intimidating character, Ling Xiang nodded. Did you feel a familiar aura from that lady? Lorraine suddenly asked. It's also my concern, said Ling Xiang, his face stern. I know I used to feel it from someone, but I can't tell who it is now. Thus, I let them rest first. You guys should pay attention. Yeah, I also felt familiar. It seems like someone had told me before, said Caesar. They were suspicious, frowning, and thinking. On the other side, Guling with her ugly facial expression guided Shi Yan and Ouyang Luo Shuang to a palace. Her small face was so cold when she said, "This place is where our distinguished guests are treated. Please come in. If you need something, you can call the servants." Then, Guling wore a hateful face and cursed men under her breath. She left with a snort. She and Cecilia had a good friendship. Because of Shi Yan, Lena had confined Cecilia. And now, Shi Yan came from the fantasy zone with a strange lady and had even stated that she was his woman. Guling thought it was so unfair to Cecilia, so she didn't give him her good face. Wait a minute, I saw you with Cecilia last time. She didn't come here with her teacher Lena. Shi Yan called her and asked, "Why did you ask about Cecilia? You found happiness again. Why do you need to concern yourself your old one? Men are so unfaithful." Guling's eyes shifted between Ouyang Luo Shuang and Shi Yan, mocking. Is Cecilia here or not? Shi Yan frowned. I don't know. Guling snorted and turned away immediately, her face cold. It has been so many years and you're still loose. No matter where you are, you never lack beauties to accompany you. You can't change your stripes even if someone beats you to death. Ouyang Luo Shuang's cold and clear voice arose after Guling had left. Her soul consciousness checked around and found no one near them. Thus, she didn't want to stay near Shi Yan anymore. She proactively distanced herself from him, her face cold but bright. Shi Yan was standing by the door and looking at the ancient architecture of the palace. Hearing her voice, he turned around, his eyes scanning her body as he said, "So, are you one of the women on my side?" Well, we hugged and kissed. You're one of them anyway, eh? He snapped back because of Ouyang Luo Shuang's mocking attitude. Ouyang Luo Shuang's jade-like face blushed as she gritted her teeth. Bastard! No matter what you say, some things can't be changed. Moreover, in this fantasy star, you have to admit that you're my woman, said Shi Yan with a shrug. Wait until my teacher comes. We will make it clear. That little girl won't hate you anymore. Ouyang Luo Shuang took a deep breath and then resumed her normal countenance. She had trained her disposition better than anyone else. I'm very curious. Who's your teacher? Shi Yan squinted. The aura on Ouyang Luo Shuang's body was similar to the God Clan's expert's aura that he knew. He had been skeptical about this, but he didn't have any evidence. He was curious when Ouyang Luo Shuang mentioned her teacher. And now, she did it again, so Shi Yan took the chance to ask her. Who is he? Ouyang Luo Shuang looked bewildered. She hesitated for a while and then said, I don't know his profile. but his realm and cultivation base are profound. He got something to do on the Fantasy Star, so he asked me to wait outside. While waiting for him, I was found and captured. Pausing for a while, Ouyang Luo Shuang's bright eyes became tender as he muttered. Still, I need to thank you. I didn't think that a cold person like you would rescue me. Shi Yan rubbed his nose. I used to not want to save you. But I remembered you that year and I thought that if a guy like Xing Ming harassed you, even God wouldn't be able to stand it. Me that year. Ouyang Luo Shuang sounded surprised. Shi Yan nodded, his eyes strange when he recalled his memory. That year, my realm was so low. When you broke the meteorite in Sky Meteor City and got out, you were like the mood god who came to this world. You were so pure and beautiful. At that time, I thought that a woman like you should appear only in men's dreams. You shouldn't be real. That year, Shi Yan was like a small ant, while Ouyang Luo Shuang was like the moon goddess at the sky realm. There was a deep abyss between them that he could never cross. Chapter 1286. Profound Comprehension. Chapter 1286. Profound Comprehension, _ The palace that Thousand Fantasy Sect had lodged them was spacious and luxurious, with special cultivating chambers and training yards. This palace had 7 floors with 100 rooms. Each floor was around 100 meters high. This palace was large enough to keep several hundred people. Currently, only Shi Yan and Ouyang Luo Shuang stayed here and occupied many balconies and windows. At night, the sky above this planet had 3 dreamy moons that formed a shape. Those moons were reflections of the 3 moons that were very far from them. They weren't the real moons here, but they could still illuminate the Fantasy Star. The night fell. Shi Yan and Ouyang Luo Shuang were standing on a stone platform and watching the beautiful sea of stars out there. They thought this scenery was so marvelous that nothing could compare to it. They were the warriors from Grace Mainland. After many years and billions of miles away, they met up on this planet. And now, they were beholding the beauty of the sky and recalling memories in the past. That year, after I got out of the meteorite, I could vaguely feel your aura. However, because of the 3 god sex matter, I had never tried to investigate. Ouyang Luo Shuang's eyes were clear, and she was speaking naturally. I couldn't believe that the weak warrior of that year could have today's attainment. It seems like we can't predict anything. Shi Yan sounded frank and elegant. I couldn't believe it. You, the goddess of that year, are standing with me to recall our memory. I could never believe that I can be close to you too. Can you not mention this? Ouyang Luo Shuang wore a cold face. Shi Yan laughed evilly. Are you the new master of the bloodthirsty force? Asked Ouyang Luo Shuang all of a sudden. Oh, you also know the bloodthirsty force? Shi Yan was surprised. Of course, I've heard about it. I've been wandering around the universe for many years. I've experienced many things and of course I know many secrets, Ouyang Luo Shuang said calmly. Then she asked curiously, I heard that 10,000 years ago, the bloodthirsty force was the malignant tumor of the cosmos. Everyone hated it. The 8 chiefs were so brutal and bloodthirsty indeed. They had broken the sea of stars. People wanted to destroy that force. They said that it was the source of evil. When she talked about the bloodthirsty force, she didn't have any nice words. There were only negative and malicious ones. Shi Yan smiled and said, Who told you these things? Everyone said like that, she answered casually. It was. I don't know how it was before, but later, I will change it. Shi Yan pondered and then said, The God clan has claimed the world, but they couldn't change it positively. They've been even more extreme than the bloodthirsty force. Because of the God clan's rise, many races went extinct. They aren't good either. Ouyang Luo Shuang nodded. My teacher said the same. What? Shi Yan was bewildered and more skeptical. He told me that the God Lord had a coma because of severe damages. He had authorized the Elder Committee. The Elder Committee then stirred up the miasma in the God clan. They have many problems, she explained. Shi Yan's suspicion became heavier. He frowned and said nothing. His mind flickered when Shi Yan suddenly looked at a direction, squinting and furrowing his brows. Why did she come here? Who? Ouyang Luo Shuang asked. Xingming's daughter, Shiyan rubbed his chin, his eyes awkward. Ouyang Luo Shuang snorted. While I was still captured, I heard Xing Shan and Wei Yun talk about this woman. She has many men. It's true that she has slept with 1,000 men. Shiyan was surprised. He nodded. I see. That's dirty. Too dirty. I don't want to see her. She stood up. Her slender body flashed and she disappeared. Shortly after, the mature Xingying came from afar, swinging her hips and thrusting her chest. She looked sexy with her cherry blossom countenance. Evidently, she wore her best makeup. She giggled, light rippling through her eyes. I represent the Broken Hall and I would like to apologize. My father and I feel very sorry for what my uncle had done. I'm bringing some goods here to compensate. I don't need her stuff, Ouyang Luo Shuang's voice whispered in Shiyan's ears. I don't want to see this woman either. Shiyan chuckled. Standing on the high tower, he observed Xingying down there and said, even if you guys want to apologize, it's not you who should come here. Xingming isn't qualified, let alone you girl. His eyes became focused. Shortly after, countless starlight dots turned into brilliant dragons coming out of nowhere. They grabbed Xingying's voluptuous body and directly hauled her away. A moonlight beam emerged. Ouyang Luo Shuang reappeared. She looked at the direction Xingying had been thrown away. Her bold brows twitched. She came for you. This woman was arousing. She came to jump onto your lap. Shiyan just smiled. I thought you would be happy to welcome her. Although she's dirty, her figure is outstanding. A man like you, well, why did you stop her by the door? Ouyang Luo Shuang's eyes were sparkling. I got you here. No one else is more beautiful. You said that she's dirty. I always keep myself clean and pure, Shiyan said deliberately. Keep yourself clean and pure? Ouyang Luo Shuang's curved her lips as if she was trying to keep herself from mocking him. Please don't humiliate yourself with such words. Shiyan darkened his face. Huh. Ouyang Luo Shuang couldn't help but chuckle. She looked like a beautiful frost flower that was so mesmerizing. Shiyan was lost in that smile. You look really beautiful when you smile, he sincerely complimented. You should smile more. It will make you friendlier. I like when you smile. Ouyang Luo Shuang stopped smiling. She snorted and then said, You're not my man. As far as I know, you were sealed in the meteorite for 1,000 years. I guess you haven't experienced love, right? When I kissed you, you were so frightened. Haha, is it the first time a man touched you? Shiyan grinned contentedly. Ouyang Luo Shuang's face became cold. Just consider it payment for rescuing you. Shiyan shrugged. He contemplated for a while and then said, Can you show me your incipient extent? I always feel familiar to the power you've cultivated. Why do I have to show you? Ouyang Luo Shuang snorted, but she still released her incipient extent. Her incipient extent was strange. It had bright round moons held high in the sky above the shoreless cold lake. This lake was crystal clear and deep, and it reflected the moonlight. Her incipient extent was so cold as if it was affected by the cold lake. She had fused with the essence of the moon and the cold power. That's why she got this strange incipient extent. As soon as the incipient extent appeared, Shiyan felt so cold that it was as if he was covered in a world of snow and ice. Indeed, it feels so familiar. Shiyan observed her incipient extent. His mind flickered and his incipient extent also appeared. The sky was now covered by a beautiful picture. The suns, moons, and stars arose. Life stars slowly spun. The space of this universe was so vast. His incipient extent seemed to cover the entire sea of stars. The lunar stars he had got from the God Clan's precursor had holy, flawless auras that were pretty similar to the moonlight inside Ouyang Luo Shuang's incipient extent. It was even more mysterious. Your incipient extent looks like the vast sea of stars. I have never seen any marvelous incipient extent like this. Ouyang Luo Shuang was astounded. She pulled herself together to observe. She looked shaken. That moon makes me feel so close. You. Retrieve your incipient extent. You can go there to sense the lunar star in my incipient extent, Shiyan enticed her. Ouyang Luo Shuang was bewildered and her eyes were hesitant. Entering his incipient extent meant handing her life into his hands. Normally, warriors at the same or similar realms would never do that. Unless they were close to each other, they could take risks once to experience. In each warrior's incipient extent, he or she was the only god. The warrior could create miracles or supernatural abilities. Staying in the other's incipient extent was the most passive moment of one's life that was similar to giving his life to the other. Don't linger. If I want to harm you, you think you can be that free? To you, my incipient extent is a good encounter. It's you who can take the chance to learn or not, Shiyan frowned. Ouyang Luo Shuang gritted her teeth. Pondering for a while, she retrieved her incipient extent and flew up to his incipient extent. Both Ouyang Luo Shuang and Shiyan had the same wonderful feeling. She felt like she had entered a whole new world while wandering in the vast sea of stars. In this place, Shiyan's aura was everywhere. She felt like she had entered a deep place of Shiyan's soul and mind. As soon as Ouyang Luo Shuang entered his incipient extent, his soul shrugged as he felt that he could understand every secret in Ouyang Luo Shuang's mind. He used to experience the same thing. His co-soul could recognize the moods of the creatures on Grace Mainland. He could enter their dreams and minds easily like a real god. At this moment, he had this feeling. In his incipient extent, he was the god and Ouyang Luo Shuang was his citizen. He could control her life and death. Concentrating, his soul consciousness dashed from everywhere and entered Ouyang Luo Shuang's sea of consciousness, soul altar, and even her incipient extent. Ouyang Luo Shuang's incipient extent became a small space inside his incipient extent. He could use his mind to feel it, and he could decode the mysteries of her incipient extent through his own incipient extent. It was a marvelous feeling that he couldn't describe. He suddenly had an idea that if he used his devouring power Upanishad now, he could swallow Ouyang Luo Shuang's incipient extent and turn her incipient extent into a part of his incipient extent. Unconsciously, he closed his eyes and tried to comprehend this terrific feeling when someone had entered his incipient extent. In the same manner, Ouyang Luo Shuang had stepped on the moon inside his incipient extent. Now, she knew that this moon was the utmost of the power Upanishad she cultivated. The moonlight here carried the ultimate truth and essence of the power she had been pursuing. Her soul shivered. She was so thrilled as she pulled herself together and sensed the marvel of the moon. Actually, the moons in this incipient extent was the God clan's precursor's incipient extent that had the essence of the light power Upanishad. To her, a warrior cultivating the moonlight power, it was a priceless treasure. The two then remained in this peculiar condition to find and learn useful abilities and comprehend their powers. Their souls slowly sublimated during this process. Their understanding of power and realm gradually increased. They had temporarily forgotten the time to immerse themselves into this endless marvel. Their souls were trying to comprehend the deep meanings of their powers. They were pursuing a profound comprehension of their power Upanishads. Chapter 1287. Clearly See the Crisis. Chapter 1287. Clearly See the Crisis. A beautiful woman was hung upside down on a branch of an ancient tree that was 100 meters tall. The transparent dragons that bound her disappeared after a long time. Thud. Xinging fell on the ground and rolled. She felt so much pain, her beautiful face filled with rage. Even when she was a child, she had never experienced such humiliation. She had ignored her pride and dignity to jump onto his lap. Not only was she rejected, but she was also thrown away. It was the biggest humiliation in her whole life. Although she had third sky of ethereal god realm cultivation base, she couldn't urge a bit of her energy to strike back the dragons. It made her both outraged and fearful. After waiting until the dragons vanished, she could finally move. Looking at the palace far away, she gritted her teeth and flew back there. Shortly after, she came to the door and attempted to ask for an explanation from Shiyan. However, when she looked up, she became baffled. On a prominent stone tower of the palace, Shiyan's incipient extent emerged like a brilliant galaxy with the diamond-like twinkling stars. Ouyang Luoshuang was like a moonlight beam moving on the moon inside his incipient extent. Shiyan closed his eyes. His face looked like he was immersed in his world and comprehending his realm. After a glance, she was shaken, but her eyes were so malignant. She had a good understanding of the mysterious magic of the incipient extent and the realm. She knew clearly that when Shiyan opened his incipient extent for Ouyang Luoshuang, they shouldn't be disturbed. If she seized the chance and took revenge now. Xingying squinted and considered. She couldn't make up her mind yet. Apparently, Shiyan didn't put her in his eyes. He wasn't interested in her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been that harsh. He would have given her a chance to approach him. She was humiliated when they first met personally. With her natural characteristics, she would take revenge. However, the other was the bloodthirsty force's master. What if? Xingying didn't dare to act rashly. You'd better leave. However, at this moment, Guling appeared quietly like a forest spirit and looked at her. Xingying's bold brows arched. She threw a glance at Guling mockingly. So? You're interested in him too? Guling's small face became so cold as she sneered. You think everybody will be like you? Like a fly attracted to meat when you see a man? You want to bite him or taste him, right? Guling and Cecilia were good friends and she didn't like Xingying. When she talked to her, she didn't want to be polite. You know what I want to do? Xingying changed her visage, her eyes sinister. No matter what you want to do to Shiyan, I advise you to forget that idea. He's not someone you can offend. Don't bring trouble to your father, your broken hull, or our three forces. Otherwise, no one can protect you. Gulian snorted. You should leave before he wakes up. If he knows you got such ideas, he won't just throw you away like a stray dog. I'm afraid you will become a dead dog. Although Gulian wasn't old, when she talked harshly, she could make people's scalps numb. Xingying's beautiful face became ugly. She knew this place was the Thousand Fantasy Sect's territory and Gulian was Ling Xiang's adopted daughter. She couldn't offend Liang Xiang. Pondering for a while, Xingying threw Guling a malignant look then left. After Xingying had left, Gulian looked up to watch Shiyan. Her bright eyes became surprised. She saw Shiyan open his incipient extent for Ouyang Luoshuang, and the two of them were bizarrely comprehending their power Upanishads. Shiyan's incipient extent looked like a beautiful and vast galaxy. It caught her eyes. She had seen many incipient extents of incipient god realm experts, but she had never seen a spectacular incipient extent like this one. She suddenly felt small when she lifted up her face and beheld the sky. It seemed that incipient extent had swallowed the entire sea of stars. This incipient extent is really marvelous. If she got a chance to learn her power Upanishad's mysteries in there, she must have a big harvest. I wonder if Cecilia has had the good opportunity to cultivate in his incipient extent. This man is too flirty. He loves every beauty he's met. Despicable. Gulian muttered at first, but later on, her small face became colder as she shouted at the end. Dash. A remote area on the Fantasy Star. There were some green bamboo cottages covered in the thick white mist. This kind of white mist was so strange that it could prevent all kinds of soul energy, soul consciousness, and even noises from intruding the place. Inside a bamboo cottage, Lena of the Heaven River Temple frowned. Floating in front of her was a big drop of water that was showing the scene of Shiyan and Ouyang Luoshuang comprehending power Upanishads together. Cecilia looked dispirited. She sat quietly in the room and watched the drop of water. She bit her lower lip and said nothing. He took a ride on Tsunamic Chamber of Commerce's ships. Then, he got into a dispute with warriors from the Broken Hall because of that girl. He said that she was his woman. Caesar had to apologize. We thought that he didn't have any relationship with this girl, and he said that just to save her, but... Lena looked at Cecilia. She found that Cecilia looked painful and bitter. She sighed and then continued. But it seems like they do have something. Otherwise, she wouldn't enter his incipient extent like that without any caution. Also, he has opened his incipient extent so she could learn the marvel in there. I don't believe that they don't have any relationship. Cecilia kept her head low and didn't answer her. He doesn't deserve it. I think so. I've heard about him. This guy is a womanizer. He has never lacked women on his side wherever he goes. You're just a passenger in his life. To him, you're no different from the other women. And if you consider him a place to shelter your body and soul, you will be living in pain for the rest of your life. Lena comforted her. Cecilia thinned her lips and contemplated. After a long time, she lifted her head, her beautiful eyes showing her begrudging suffering. When I first met him, I've known who he is already. However, I've never met anyone more outstanding than him. He has touched my heart. If I let him go, I will regret it. If I hold on to him, I will sink into sorrow. But when the latter happens, I've experienced something that I can recall later. If I choose the former, I can save myself from pain, but I will miss a piece of my life. Teacher, what do you advise me? Lena was surprised as she looked at Cecilia. After a moment, she shook her head and sighed. Seems like I should keep you here for a while more. Teacher, why do the masters have to do that? Cecilia was skeptical. After 100,000 years, the 4 great clans have taken turns to control the entire cosmos. They've risen and defeated. They've kept stirring up the universe. There are many forces and races, and even galaxies have disappeared forever because of them. These 4 big forces are the fountainhead of evil in this world. Lena looked at her and said reluctantly, unfortunately, they're too powerful. In their battles, the other forces always play the supporting roles. They have to share the burden with them without any other option. We were willing to let them act like that until now. We and the other forces that aren't the 4 great creatures want to make them content to their lot. We will save and keep the peace of this universe. Well, to be frank, the Thousand Fantasy Sect, the Broken Hall, and our Heaven River Temple have accumulated for so many years. And now, we think that we got the power to control the world. We want to try once. Right? Cecilia hit the nail on the head. Lena was surprised. She smiled. Yeah, it will develop like that. What do they want to do? Asked Cecilia. Hand back Bloodthirsty's remains to Yen and agree to form the alliance with them. After he's left the Fantasy Star, they will spread this information. The God Clan will then send the experts to kill him. The Bloodthirsty Force will also know this. They will send people to protect him. Then, after they leave the Thousand Fantasy Star area, the war will take place officially. It will be a deadly one for both sides, said Lena. I got it. Yen is the pawn to ignite the flame of war. We will stimulate them and make them fight before they've prepared carefully. Then, we will watch and choose the side to support, said Cecilia. My excellent student. Your thoughts are clear. Yeah, you're not wrong. Lena complimented her student. Inside Yen's incipient extent, time and space seemed to cease to move. He controlled everything. If he wanted time to slow down, it slowed down. Ouyang Luo Shuang stayed in his incipient extent. She moved around the moons in there and seemed to not want to come back. She was trying to comprehend the essence of the God Clan's precursors' power Upanishads. She didn't care about the time passing by. Yen sank into his incipient extent and searched between the space and star powers Upanishads. After an unknown time, he woke up. He pulled himself together, frowning and sensing. In his incipient extent, a massive starlight hand grabbed Ouyang Luo Shuang by her waist and pulled her out of a lake. She was put back to the real world. Yen looked at Ouyang Luo Shuang, his eyes complicated. After he had analyzed Ouyang Luo Shuang's power Upanishads and incipient extent, he came to a conclusion. Ouyang Luo Shuang's teacher must be a God Clan's expert. He could never look down on some experts who had mastered the power Upanishad of the God Clan's ancestors and imparted it to Ouyang Luo Shuang at first sky of incipient God realm. Ouyang Luo Shuang had mentioned that this man was heading to Fantasy Star to do something. Yen had a bad premonition. Vaguely, he felt a big crisis coming soon. He looked at Ouyang Luo Shuang and pondered. Suddenly, he said, in the coming time, if the situation doesn't turn right, I will have to do something that will make you hate me. I want to warn you in advance. Don't worry. I won't hurt you, but I have to tell you in advance. Since his words were vague, Ouyang Luo Shuang couldn't understand it. What do you mean? I mean, perhaps I need to use you to achieve my goal. Yan's eyes were strange. Use me? What value do I have that you can use? Her clear eyes were confused. She didn't know her teacher's identity. She just knew that he was very intimidating. As she couldn't relate Yan and her teacher, of course, she couldn't guess what Yan had in his mind. Well, you just need to know that. When the time comes, you will understand what I meant today. Chapter 1288, Carefree. Chapter 1288, Carefree _ The islet in the middle of the fantasy lake. Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine were discussing how to talk to Yan tomorrow. They considered whether they should give him some challenge before giving him the bloodthirsties remains or not. If they just gave them to him, would that be too direct? His realm is a little low. If we give him a challenge, I'm afraid he can't handle it. Even though we have to give him these things, we must do it like we care about it. Sigh, it's troublesome though. Lorraine forced a smile. Yeah, it's just first sky of incipient god realm. It isn't worth mentioning. If he wasn't the new master, he wouldn't be respected. But if we give the remains to him easily, will he doubt us or not? Asked Ling Xiang. Don't look at me. You guys are the masters in this sort of stuff. I don't know how to act in such a conspiracy, Caesar waved his hands. Ling Xiang and Lorraine went stiff when they heard Caesar. They looked a little embarrassed. All of a sudden, Ling Xiang changed his countenance. An ancient book flew out of his sleeve. He touched the void and the blood flipped its pages. A magical energy emerged from the page like white light rings outside the planet. It seemed like he could use this book to check the changes that happened outside his fantasy star. At the same time, a soul message came from the book to Ling Xiang's sea of consciousness. Caesar and Lorraine kept silent. They frowned, watching Ling Xiang and waiting. They knew that the ancient book was a strange treasure in Ling Xiang's hands that was called the Book of Thousand Fantasy and Myriad Change. This book could connect to the marvelous fantasy zone and create illusions there. They all looked at Ling Xiang as they wanted to know what was going on. Ling Xiang had ordered his subordinates not to disturb them when they began to discuss unless it was something really important. As they were still discussing these matters, if someone contacted Ling Xiang now, it meant that the news wasn't small. Indeed, Ling Xiang put away the Book of Thousand Fantasy and Myriad Change into his sleeve. His face slightly paled. There is a tornado of meteorite pieces that appeared out of nowhere in the fantasy zone. Billions of these pieces have attacked the fantasy zone like sharp sword. The white light rings outside the planet have stopped them. But they've already hurt and killed many fantasy animals and my troopers. Who has the guts to do that? Lorraine's face was grave. This place was the headquarters star of the Thousand Fantasy Sect, and the Thousand Fantasy Sect was the prominent force in this universe that not many forces dared to provoke. Besides those lunatics of the four great creatures, I think no blind warrior dares to act wantonly in my fantasy zone. Ling Xiang's handsome face turned cold and dark. They reported that they saw a lazy man riding the moon nucleus and approaching our fantasy star. What does he look like? Lorraine was startled. She thought that she knew something. They said that he looks lazy. Along the way, he still drank wine and ate fruits casually. He doesn't mind our guards much, Ling Xiang said coldly. Lazy. 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 Lorraine was shocked as a light flashed in her head. She hissed in fright. Carefree. It's Carefree. Hearing her, Ling Xiang and Caesar were startled. It's him. The girl's teacher is Carefree. I should have guessed it earlier, shouted Lorraine. As Ling Xiang and Caesar heard about the name Carefree, their countenances became very serious. Thoughts rolled into their brains. Relating the name to the familiar feeling they had earlier, they knew Lorraine was correct. Carefree was coming. Carefree was one of the four great heavenly kings of the God clan and a supernatural character of the previous generation. This man had disappeared for thousands of years. It had been so long that Caesar, Ling Xiang, and Lorraine couldn't figure it out earlier. When Carefree was famous and intimidating, Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine were still juniors at incipient God realm who still needed to follow their teachers. They knew Carefree's deeds well. Thus, they all discolored when they knew that it was Carefree who was approaching. Rumble. Rumble. The fantasy star suddenly shook hard as if a massive beast was barging at it. The ground of the fantasy star shook hard. Many mountains collapsed and rivers surged. The quiet fantasy star for countless years seemed about to receive its doomsday. All the warriors of the Thousand Fantasy sect were frightened. "Where's the Thousand Fantasy sect's master? Open the gate. Do you want me to break your door?" A voice came from deep inside the clouds above the fantasy star that then reverberated in every corner of the planet and shook the minds of every warrior. As soon as that voice arose, it was like the heavenly prestige pressing on the sky of the fantasy star and suffocating people. "Here he comes," Caesar hissed. "He can break it, really. Let him in." Lorraine forced a smile. Ling Xiang nodded and then took out the heavenly fragrant soul-soothing jade box. After giving it to Lorraine, Ling Xiang said, "You should hurry and find Yan. Give the box to him and ask him to leave immediately." Caesar also gave his box to Lorraine. "Tell that kid to flee quickly. If he dies here, we will all be in trouble." Lorraine didn't say anything. She grabbed the boxes and disappeared instantly. At the same time, the terrible shock came from the sky as the voice arose again. "It's not easy for the Thousand Fantasy sect to refine layers of barriers and restrictions. What a pity if this protection gets damaged. I will count to 3. People down there, you should consider carefully." 1. Ling Xiang sighed and then spoke up, "Welcome, Precursor Carefree. I'm the current master of the Thousand Fantasy sect, Ling Xiang. Welcome to our headquarters." His finger fiddled with the Book of Thousand Fantasy and myriad changed to lift up the barrier so Carefree could enter the planet. A tender, handsome man rode the moon essence and crossed the sky to come. He landed directly to the center land of the fantasy star. Many warriors on the fantasy star gathered as they saw him. The fantasy lake where Ling Xiang and Caesar were standing changed suddenly. The thick forest and grand palaces replaced the lake, the cottages, and the mountain ranges. Ban Yu, Xingming, Xingsheng, Wei Yun, and Gulian appeared from the palaces around and looked at the man in fear. Many of them didn't know him, but they were still scared. The imposing aura of the man descended from the sky had completely subdued them and made them want to bow to him. "Who attacked my student at the chaotic area out there?" After a deafening explosion, the moon underneath Carefree's feet had destroyed some palaces. He landed and lazily raked his eyes around. He saw Xing Shang and grinned. Xing Shang felt like his soul had left him already. "Come here," Carefree waved his hand. Xing Shang and Wei Yun were lifted in the same way a person pinched a chicken's neck and lifted it up. They fell in front of Carefree. Carefree opened his mouth and spurred out 2 beams of moonlight that then intruded Xing Shang's and Wei Yun's brains through their eyes. The moonlight then moved around their sea of consciousness to collect their memories. As the others were watching them, Xing Shang and Wei Yun were so frightened. Dark blood oozed out of their eyes, ears, nostrils, and mouth. The light in their eyes dimmed out. Their skies dried up as if it was dry tree bark. They lost their vitality quickly. Everybody felt their hair rising as they were so panic-stricken. They knew Carefree had used a memory extraction technique to take their memories directly that had destroyed their lives and souls to get the part of memory he needed. Xingming felt so chilled. At this moment, he thought he was frozen by a cold power. He couldn't help but shiver. His eyes were filled with a dark fear. He looked at Caesar, gritting his teeth and begging, "Master, please consider that I've served both you and your father. Please spare my life." After he finished, Xing Shang's and Wei Yun's life energy were all gone. Carefree had collected what he wanted. Carefree smiled darkly and looked at him. "Turns out you're the ringleader." "Master!" Xingming screamed, kneeled down, and pounded his head on the ground, begging Caesar. His head bled terribly. Xingming stood next to him. She was bewildered for a while and then kneeled down, crying and pounding her head against the floor. She didn't mind her bleeding face or the pain and continued to beg to Caesar. "Please, Hall Master, please save my father." At this moment, they knew that only if Caesar helped him, Xingming could survive. Since this man could kill Xing Shang and Wei Yun easily and the others couldn't even wiggle a bit, they knew that he was at the immortal realm. This sort of character could effortlessly kill them with only a wave of his hand. Caesar, the warrior obsessed with martial arts, had a dark and calm face like the water. He looked at Xingming and Xingying, who were pounding their heads on the floor to beg him, talking all of a sudden. Precursor Carefree, 2 warriors of our broken hall were killed. Please let it go. Let it go. Carefree was surprised. He eyed Caesar and asked, "You're Simon's son, right?" "Haha, your father had to call me senior." "Your broken hall's warriors dared to kidnap my student." "Well, it's simple to let it go. When all the ones involved in this kidnapping case are dead, I will let it go." He rose one hand to grab Xingming and squinted, his face dark and sinister. "No," Xingming shouted ear-splittingly. "My father gave you face, but it doesn't mean that I will do the same." Caesar suddenly screamed. His hempen clothes floated with powerful lightning strikes. He stepped toward Carefree and raised his fist. His punch was rough and simple. Boom. Boom. The space next to Carefree exploded continuously. The billions of lightning bolts moved together as if they wanted to create billions of holes in this world. Caesar cultivated lightning power Upanishad. Usually, warriors with the lightning power Upanishad could cultivate the electricity power Upanishad at the same time. It made them stronger. Simon, Caesar's father, cultivated both power Upanishad. However, Caesar didn't use that method. He had cultivated only lightning power Upanishad. In 10,000 years, he was immersed in the world of only lightning, offering it everything beautiful in his life. He didn't like women. He had ignored the matters of the broken hall. He didn't enjoy life. Just like an ascetical monk, he had dedicated his life to find the path of his cultivation and the lightning power Upanishad. He had not been lazy for even a day. This punch of his had the passion of his lifelong pursuit of lightning power. His attack had torn the sky and stimulated the 8 poles of the world. The lightning strikes shook the sky and reverberated like Caesar's angry roar. His roar was formidable and overbearing with the loneliness accumulated for 10,000 years. Carefree, the expert of the previous generation, had a grave face standing in billions of lightning strikes. His eyes emitted magical lights. Carefree's eyes squinted and created crescent moons. The 3 illusions of the moon above the fantasy star's sky spun and became real, moving around Carefree. They shattered and exploded continuously as if they were about to destroy this entire world. Caesar stopped after that punch. However, there were countless punches in the void between him and Carefree. The punches were like thunder in the sky that created a world of pure lightning. Chapter 1289, Unyielding. Chapter 1289, Unyielding, _ Caesar didn't move for even a bit, but his punches had filled the void by Carefree and created an endless magical world. You're much better than your father. You're closer to second sky of a mortal realm than the other 2. You've comprehended the ultimate essence of lightning. But it's unfortunate that your soul can't transform yet. Carefree looked at Caesar and complimented, but it's not enough to stop me. Anyway, I'm at a higher realm. I had to spend 7,000 years to break through to this realm. Thus, you can only watch me kill him. Carefree looked at Xingming and smiled. A crescent moon arose on Xingming's chest. It then stabbed his heart, broke his body, and shot towards Xingming's soul altar. The moon shattered his soul altar immediately. Carefree touched his head. A bright full moon arose. This bright moon was so pure and was created by billions of the god power's beams. The bright moon changed and magically erased Caesar's punches in the air. When Carefree was attacking Caesar, he killed Xingming. Unless Caesar troubled him and distracted his mind, Caesar couldn't prevent him from killing Xingming. Apparently, Caesar wasn't strong enough to keep Carefree's full attention. That was why Xingming was dead now. Xingying's face was bleeding. She stopped pounding her head against the floor. She was ashen as she looked at her father, who was a corpse now. Her face was dark and glum as if her soul had left her. "Caesar!" Lorraine hissed all of a sudden. Caesar wore a brave face. He had prepared to take risks. He looked as if he was struggling in his mind. "Caesar!" hissed Lorraine once more time. Caesar's tense nerves relaxed. The expressions in his eyes changed for a while before he resumed his normal visage. Carefree looked like he appreciated Caesar a lot. His dark eyes became tender. He spoke up all of a sudden. I'm here to discuss with the Thousand Fantasy Sect, Broken Hall, and Heaven River Temple. We want to exchange an entire star area for each piece of Bloodthirsty's remains. We can carry it out immediately. Ling Xiang had guessed his purpose earlier. Hearing him, he replied with a forced smile. We gave the remains to the new master of the Bloodthirsty Force. We got a good deal already. Carefree squinted. He immediately recognized that Lorraine wasn't here. The moonlight swirled in his eyes. After a while, he grinned. Well, your fantasy star is really extraordinary. Even I was misled. He moved and his figure faded. Caesar and Ling Xiang exchanged looks. They were so frightened. They left and headed to Shuryen. Gulian, Banyu, and the others hurried to move to the palace that the Thousand Fantasy Sect had lodged the distinguished guests. On the other side, Carefree is here. You take the 3 boxes and leave the Fantasy Star now. They contain Bloodthirsty's remains. I have discussed with Caesar and Ling Xiang. Once you guys and the God Clan start the war, our 3 forces will support you. Lorraine appeared out of nowhere and gave him the 3 heavenly fragrant soul-soothing jade boxes. She urged him to leave immediately. Carefree? Heavenly King Carefree of the God Clan. Shuryen asked calmly. Hurry up. I'm afraid the illusions of the Fantasy Star can't hold him for long. You cultivate space power Upanishad, right? You better tear the void and leave now. Return to your ancient continent, Lorraine urged him. Shuryen lifted his head to look at the sky, his face grimaced. With the connection between Shuryen and Grace Mainland, he could return to the land with the last beam of his energy while he was in the chaotic space basin. However, he tried and found the space was so heavy as if countless mountain ranges were pressing on it. He couldn't even move. He immediately realized that it was too late. Carefree had noticed him. Carefree is here. I can't leave. Shuryen looked at Lorraine and frowned. Abruptly, he turned away and grabbed Ouyang Luo Shuang. He placed one hand on her back and urged his power. He whispered into her ear, I'm so sorry. Ouyang Luo Shuang was shocked because of what Lorraine had said. She knew that her teacher was called Carefree, and the one Shuryen and Lorraine had mentioned was the Heavenly King Carefree, the peak existence of the God Clan. She needed time to arrange her thoughts. As she wasn't cautious, Shuryen grabbed her. When she recognized the situation, it was too late to wiggle. Shuryen had controlled her body in just a blink of an eye. Ouyang Luo Shuang felt chilled and she snarled, What are you doing? I've told you before that I have to use you sometimes. And now it's the moment. Shuryen forced a smile and apologized. A strange light shot out from his eyes as he pulled the 3 boxes Lorraine had given him and threw them into the space inside his incipient extent. Then, his face became dark and cold. The murderous aura twirled around him brutally. Sorry, he said. Then, Carefree came from the sky and landed in front of him. Teacher, Ouyang Luo Shuang screamed, her eyes regaining consciousness. Carefree squinted and looked at her and then at Shuryen. You're the bloodthirsty successor? Shuryen nodded. Only at first sky of incipient god realm. Too low. I can kill you easily. Yeah, hand me Bloodthirsty's remains and release my disciple. I will let you go. I'm a man of his word, Carefree said indifferently. I want to leave and I want to bring Bloodthirsty's remains with me. Tell me what I should do. Shuryen replied coldly. It means you will die, Carefree shook his head. Ling Xiang and Caesar arrived. Gulian and Banyu stopped far from them and watched with complicated eyes. They hadn't thought that they would see such a situation when they came. They were dumbfounded. Before Carefree had arrived, Shuryen had said that Ouyang Luo Shuang was his woman. He had forced Caesar to admit his mistake and forced Xingshang to chop off his arm. But now, he was keeping Ouyang Luo Shuang as his hostage to bargain with Carefree. How heartless was this man to be able to switch his face like that? At the critical time, he could use his woman to cushion his back. How despicable and vicious was this man? Many people disdained him. They thought that they had wronged him. He failed the others so badly. Only Caesar, Ling Xiang, Lorraine, and Gulian nodded discreetly. They knew that what Yen was doing was the only way that gave him a chance to talk to Carefree. They highly appreciated Yen's evil and agile wisdom. They thought that only this kind of character could compete against the God Clan. I got 2 souls. You know this, right? If you kill this soul of mine, I can still exist. But I know your student can't do that. Yeah, I don't know how much you favor your student. Perhaps you don't mind her being dead or alive. Yen looked at Carefree and spoke. If so, I can only blame my bad luck. I know what had happened from Xing Shang's and Wei Yun's souls. Although you aren't my disciple's lover, you guys are friends. Otherwise, you wouldn't rescue her. Since you've saved her, just give me Bloodthirsty's remains. You can leave then. Is this clear? Carefree squinted. I want to take the remains with me. Yen was persistent. I believe that you won't hurt your friends. Your threat is just a funny joke in my eyes. Carefree sounded nonchalant. Oh, really? Yen's eyes were cold. A bone thorn appeared in his hand. With a swift move of his wrist, the bone thorn directly thrust into Ouyang Luo Shuang's abdomen. Ouyang Luo Shuang went numb, her bright eyes filled with fear. She had never thought that Yen would attack her. Feeling the agony in her tummy, she gritted her teeth in resentment. She thought that once she escaped, she would make Yen lose his face. Now she understood the strange words he had told her. She knew what use Yen had mentioned. Although Yen had promised that he wouldn't kill her, this wound on her body was real. She hated Yen for his bold and cruel deeds. He attacked her. Yen could feel Ouyang Luo Shuang's body so stiff. As their bodies were so close to each other, Yen could feel her resentment and even her soul movement. Perhaps it was related to Ouyang Luo Shuang's activity in his incipient extent. It seemed like the subtle connection between them hadn't been cut off yet. But he had no choice. He knew Ouyang Luo Shuang would trouble him later, but he had to be persistent now. Space here was locked. Carefree was at second sky of Immortal Realm. Thus, Ouyang Luo Shuang was his only escape. She was the last trick he had to protect himself. He was lucky that he could guess Ouyang Luo Shuang's teacher was some powerful character of the God Clan. Banyu, Gulian, Guling, and the others were aghast. They were dumbstruck looking at the bleeding wound in Ouyang Luo Shuang's abdomen. They didn't expect that Yen dared to attack her. Carefree hadn't thought that he dared to that either. When Ouyang Luo Shuang was stabbed, he became hesitant. He had anticipated that Yen wouldn't attack her, and what he had done was all he could do. He wasn't going to make it more terrible. However, it was just his prediction from what he got from Xing Shang's and Wei Yun's memories. He wasn't so sure or able to confirm anything. It was because he didn't know Yen. He didn't know how this successor of Bloodthirsty was. At the same time, Ouyang Luo Shuang was the only warrior whose cultivation path was much appropriate in the past 10,000 years. That's why he decided to impart Ouyang Luo Shuang the marvelous power Upanishad, even though she wasn't a member of the God Clan. He considered Ouyang Luo Shuang his only official disciple and nurtured her. He had refined a moon for Ouyang Luo Shuang to cultivate. It spoke up the fact that he really favored and appreciated this disciple he had when he was already old. He didn't want to lose this disciple. Thus, he didn't dare to bet. After I can confirm that I'm safe, I'll let her go. Yen saw Carefree hesitating. He then grabbed Ouyang Luo Shuang and flew up into the sky. He didn't wait for Carefree to answer. Yen controlled space power, but he couldn't tear the void to escape instantly. However, it wasn't a problem to fly now. He planned to leave this area and find the area Carefree hadn't locked to open the space passage there to return to Grace Mainland. As long as Yen could return to Grace Mainland, even if Carefree came there in his world, he had the guts to fight with that expert once. He used to fight with Azure Dragon on Grace Mainland. He knew that even if he couldn't resist, he could still leave easily. Seeing Yen holding Ouyang Luo Shuang and flying away from the Fantasy Star, Carefree was outraged, but he was trying to press it down. His face was sinister. He didn't linger on the Fantasy Star anymore. He immediately flew up and chased after Yen. He planned to lock more space and observe Yen. Once he could confirm that Yen didn't want to kill Ouyang Luo Shuang, he was going to storm over to trouble him. Chapter 1290, Life Sublimation. Chapter 1290, Life Sublimation, _ After Shiryen and Carefree had left, the fantasy star resumed its peace and quiet. However, Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine still grimaced. Carefree had come suddenly and broken their plan. They couldn't help but give Shiryen bloodthirsty remains. They didn't even have time to discuss the details of their alliance. Everything was rushed. Ling Xiang, Caesar, and Lorraine were at first sky of Immortal Realm. After they had reached this realm, they had developed a wild scheme to conquer the world. However, today, when Carefree gave them a sudden visit, he was like thunder that had struck their minds. Carefree has reached second sky of Immortal Realm. I suppose the other 3 heavenly kings are at this realm too. In addition to the God Lord, we have to be very cautious, Lorraine sighed. I didn't expect him to come. However, it turns out that it isn't bad. Although it's a little different from what we've expected, it's not bad at all, Ling Xiang pondered and then said. We must spread the news. Tell Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. If Shiryen encounters bad things in our 1000 Fantasy Star area, we can't explain clearly to the others. This kid is evil. He can turn his back to her directly and use her to bargain. He's heartless, indeed, Caesar appraised Shiryen. I think he won't die that easily, Lorraine nodded. We shouldn't be the vanguard in the war with the God Clan. They're so formidable, said Ling Xiang. Caesar and Lorraine nodded in agreement. Carefree coming here today made them realize that it wasn't exaggerated that the God Clan could be the overlord of this cosmos for 10,000 years. By the edge of the Fantasy Star. Shiryen held Ouyang Luo Shuang and flew quickly like a beam of starlight. His face was stern, his eyes bright with brilliant lights. He continually checked the surroundings and didn't dare to relax for even a second. Because of the pressure that had chased after him as if it was his shadow, he knew that Carefree was still following Shiryen, although Shiryen didn't see Carefree. He was somewhere around for sure. He had escaped the Fantasy Star, but the space around was still locked. He couldn't find a slit to return to Grace Mainland. The layers of space were tight as if there was a massive hand squeezing them all together. Unless that hand loosened its grip, Shiryen couldn't move through spaces. That heavy pressure came like a rising tide that troubled him while he was flying through the fantasy zone. He had to consume his god power every second and every minute. It wasn't a normal trip. Because of Carefree's pressure, he had to spend a lot more energy than usual. Engaging in a battle with an expert at this level, Shiryen finally felt helpless. It was because of the difference between their realms, his space, star, and death and life power Upanishads. His abilities were ineffective. They couldn't bring expected results. If he didn't hold Ouyang Luo Shuang, Carefree was going to kill him for sure. Finally, he recognized a begrudging fact. His realm was too low compared to the formidable experts who had survived for more than 10,000 years. He could clearly feel that his current incipient god realm cultivation base wasn't enough to deal with the future commotions. He had to break through faster to a whole new world. It would be best that he could enter the immortal realm. Shiryen knew that the gap between the immortal realm and incipient god realm was like the distance between the sky and the deep abyss. The power and capacity of the immortal realm experts weren't something that peak of incipient god realm and the false immortal realm experts could compare to. Where are you taking me? Ouyang Luo Shuang's wound had stopped bleeding. Although her body was confined, she could still speak. How long do you plan to keep me as your hostage? Shiryan's face was cold as he shouted at her. Shut up. Then, the starlight emitted from his palm like a river and flowed into Ouyang Luo Shuang's body to restrict her ability to talk. Afterward, he checked his surroundings carefully as he knew that a pair of dark eyes was still watching him from a secret place nearby. Shiryen knew that Carefree was right behind him and observing his moves. If he relaxed his nerves for even a moment, trouble would snatch over him immediately. If Carefree could confirm that Shiryen wouldn't kill Ouyang Luo Shuang from her words, Shiryen would be tragically and instantly killed. Thus, he had to shut Ouyang Luo Shuang's mouth. Since he had come to this world, he had never struggled like this. The feeling of having someone determine his life had choked him and irritated him. Because of Carefree's pressure, he had to consume a lot of energy to move through the fantasy zone. After each distance, his god power reduced massively. He had to stay alert all the time. He had to pose that he could kill Ouyang Luo Shuang in any minute, which would scare Carefree and keep him from acting rashly. It was some sort of torment indeed. Actually, not far from Shiyan, Carefree was sitting on the moon nucleus like a patient hunter watching his prey. He released his energy unceasingly to affect the space that prevented Shiyan from tearing a space slit to escape to Grace Mainland. As long as Shiyan didn't get out of his sight, he could find the chance. Once Shiyan relaxed, he could seize the chance to rescue his student and kill Shiyan. He was waiting for an opportunity and competing with Shiyan to see who was more patient. He was confident that he would be the winner. Carefree was the domineering expert in bloodthirsty Sarah, and he was a peerless existence in the world at that time. As he had lived for more than 10,000 years, he had experienced many things. He had immersed in the mediating condition for countless years to train his mind and power Upanishad. His state of mind had been trained to become flawless. Carefree thought that Shiyan was still very young, so it would be a funny joke when he dared to struggle against him. Carefree had discreetly released his power to trouble Shiyan more when he was flying. It was going to wear out Shiyan's god power and mental power. He sneered and waited for Shiyan to use up his energy. When Shiyan's spirit broke, he could strike him only one time to kill him. Shiyan was also waiting. He felt so reluctant. He knew what idea Carefree had in his head, but he couldn't do anything to counter it. Shiyan got an idea. He believed that Caesar's team had notified Xianhe, Frederick, and Minghao about Carefree. He believed that Xianhe, Frederick, and Minghao wouldn't let him die. Because today, he was the new master of the Bloodthirsty Force and the new flag of the Bloodthirsty Force. Moreover, he was wearing the blood vein ring. He had to get out of this place. He knew that Carefree was trying to drain him and was waiting for him to be exhausted. He could only try his best. He also needed time. Xianhe and Frederick needed time to get to him. He believed that if he could seize more time, it would be a chance for him to overturn the situation. He strongly believed in this. Shiyan continued to use his god power and kept moving forward through the fantasy zone. One was running and the other was following discreetly. The two of them were having a long battle of attrition in the fantasy zone. Speaking about attrition, Shiyan wasn't Carefree's opponent. Shortly after, Shiyan couldn't stand it anymore. The god power in his body became faint and faded away. Carefree thought he had seen hope. But at this moment, Shiyan began to use his new sources of energy. They were the blood chi, the negative energy in his veins, and the star energy. Those were the alternatives he often used to replace the god power. Under Carefree's pressure, he had released himself from all restraints. He used up his energy to train his spirit and will. His understanding of power Upanishads and his soul were sublimated. They were all increasing inexplicably. His life magnetic field has sublimated. This kid has extraordinary innate talents. He is worthy of being that guy's successor. In the dark, secret void, Carefree mumbled to himself. He sounded very surprised. The life magnetic field was the core of the soul seal. It was the key feature that meant that the highly intelligent creatures were more prominent than the other creatures. For example, the life magnetic field of the four great creatures was one level greater than the other races. They had the advantage in approaching the perfect condition. The life magnetic field could sublimate and evolve with the soul seal so the creature could reach another height of life. However, not anyone could have the chance to sublimate his life magnetic field. Only those with the origins of the ancient continents could have the opportunity with adequate natural endowments. It was magical and unpredictable. As Carefree was the God Lord's subordinate, he knew the mysteries when the life magnetic field sublimated. The God Lord used to experience that. He said that it was a magnificent experience that he couldn't explain clearly. It was much more important than breaking through to a new realm. It was because it would happen when the warrior didn't recognize it. The warrior wouldn't lose his consciousness. He would be extremely responsive, which was different from the dumb and dreamy condition when a warrior comprehended a new realm. That was why Carefree didn't dare to act rashly. He just observed and felt amazed. Shiyan didn't know what was really happening when his life magnetic field sublimated. Still feeling Carefree's pressure, he realized that his soul became crystal clear and the 3 power Upanishads took turns to emerge on his soul altar. Suddenly, many matters that Yen found difficult to understand were clear to him now. It felt like a dummy got a divine potion and had his intelligence rocket. He became a genius all of a sudden. It was the soul transformation. It was similar to when a beast with low intelligence became smarter when its level increased. He could vaguely feel that this encounter that had changed his soul altar and his soul had come from the origin and the Genesis fruit that he had fused. It was somehow the result of the fusion at a deeper level with Grace Mainland. It wasn't that he was comprehending his realm and power Upanishad. It was the transformation of his soul seal. Although he was still under Carefree's pressure, the worry and anxiety in his mind had lifted up. He carried Ouyang Luo Shuang and flew rapidly. Along the way, his soul altar and sea of consciousness were calm without any ripples. Many issues he hadn't comprehended now opened to him like bright, open windows. Yen looked relaxed and calm. As he knew that Carefree was watching him, he instinctively knew how to deal with him. Yen gripped Ouyang Luo Shuang and released his pressure to tell Carefree that he was still cautious like a wild beast living in the forest for so many years. When it faced the danger, it used its instincts to predict and prepare with the perfect condition. In such a condition, he had left the fantasy zone and moved to the middle area of the 1,000 fantasy star area. When he had left the fantasy zone, he had a sudden understanding as if he could find the chance to overturn the situation in any minute and escape. His opportunity actually showed up. A dim light appeared in front of him. In just a blink of an eye, it ballooned like a massive mouth and swallowed him directly. Then, it shrank rapidly. Before Carefree came, it had disappeared strangely. When Carefree appeared, Yen had vanished into thin air, and nothing was left behind, not even his aura. It was like he didn't exist in this universe. Chapter 1291, DeCarlos. Chapter 1291, DeCarlos, _ Carefree was sitting cross-legged on the moon nucleus and hovering outside the fantasy zone, his eyes dark and cold. He had released his soul consciousness to move around. In just a glimpse, his soul consciousness had skimmed through the vast area of the 1,000 fantasy star and searched each life star. He got nothing. Carefree made a conclusion. Yen had torn the space and ran away. This conclusion made him sober. He knew that he had closed the space here and Yen wasn't able to tear even a small slit. He immediately confirmed that someone had helped Yen and delivered him away. If that expert could take someone from the space he had sealed, that expert's realm wasn't lower than his. Also, that one must be a master in space power Upanishad. A character popped up in his mind. With a cold countenance, he talked to the void, his voice glum. DeCarlos, you messed up with my business. The wind howled from a deep area ahead of Carefree. Billions of strange lights burst off, shooting everywhere and cutting through that area, mincing space into pieces. In a narrow spacelet, a wrinkled old man wearing a long, white robe emerged. He was sitting on a massive empty fantasy crystal. Hovering by the mouth of the spacelet, the old man talked begrudgingly. Carefree, long time no see. But I don't actually want to see you. You messed with my important business right when you saw me. And now, you tell me you don't want to see me. Carefree's eyes were dark and deep as he said coldly. DeCarlos, our god clan hasn't troubled you once in 10,000 years. Today, you interfered with my business. Do you want to stand against the god clan? No, I don't dare. The old man forced a smile. His face looked like he had owed the others a lot of favors. I have no choice. I have to repay my debt. I showed myself to tell you that your disciple will be all right. Don't worry. I'll keep an eye on her. Also, you should notify the Bradley family. I delivered that kid to Thunder Firmament Star Area, which is under their management. The warriors of the Bradley family base there could have some trouble. Was it the request of the president of Chamber of Commerce or Minghao? Carefree thundered. Don't ask me. I was begrudging, you know. Sigh, I didn't want to join, but they keep chasing after me. I've been quiet for thousands of years, and they've still kept their eyes on me. My life is so awful, DeCarlos shook his head. The space slit where he hovered closed little by little while the void Carefree had troubled was smoothened and resumed its normal status. DeCarlos was the warrior with the best space power Upanishad in the cosmos. He was the sort of character that could make the 4 big clans troubled. This old man could move through spaces like a shuttle. No one could stop him. He was the target that the big forces wanted to recruit. However, until now, he didn't make it clear that he wanted to join any force. He hadn't admitted his membership in Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, either. Anyway, the warriors of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce always respected him. They assumed that he was the person that ranked only behind their president. Banyu had assumed that Yen was DeCarlos' later generation when they were outside of the Fantasy Star. Thus, they had changed their attitude toward him. They had made Xing Shang and Wei Yun hesitate to attack him. It was because of DeCarlos' fame. Today, the character that Banyu had assumed to have a relationship with Yen had appeared. He had delivered Yen to Thunder Firmament Star Area under Carefree's restriction. It was fate, indeed. Thunder Firmament Star Area. Carefree frowned. His soul consciousness flickered. He immediately found the nearest teleport formation and moved away. Thunder Firmament Star Area. This was the star area under the Bradley family's management. In the past, this area belonged to a force called the Thunder Firmament League. The Bradley family had invaded the star area and eradicated that league. The small forces of Thunder Firmament Star Area had to follow the God Clan and become their subordinates or get killed. Most of the native forces in Thunder Firmament Star Area had chosen the first option. They had begun to serve the Bradley family as their masters by collecting and exploiting the precious cultivating materials for them. The rebellious warriors disappeared like the Thunder Firmament League or ran away from Thunder Firmament Star Area. Today, the experts of the Bradley family stayed and based in Thunder Firmament Star Area with the cooperation of the native forces. The leader of the star area was Haig's uncle from the Bradley family, a second sky of incipient god realm expert called Wright. Wright was the real overlord of Thunder Firmament Star Area. He ruled the influential native forces of the star area. He stayed and guarded the Thunder Firmament Lake, which was the richest land in the entire star area. He had many beautiful women from different races, made them wear the collar with a silver bell, and crawl on the ground as his beautiful dogs. Wright often bragged about this with his peers in the God Clan. The Thunder Firmament was created by several light bands that congregated. The water here was transparent without a speck of dust. Several meteorites were floating in the heavenly lake, which had extremely rich earth and heaven energy. The warriors grew a lot of strange flowers and herbs. Materials were stacked in piles. Many battleships of the God Clan often visited the Thunder Firmament Star Area to transport materials from the native forces to this base or from this base to the Bradley family in Ancient God Star Area. Today, while Wright was having fun in his abode by the Heavenly Lake, he noticed the situation projected in the divine mirror in the secret chamber. He changed his face and kicked some of his beautiful doggy maids in his way. He was frightened when he stormed into the secret chamber. Shortly after, he knew from the divine mirror in the secret chamber that the new master of the bloodthirsty force had been delivered to his star area. Wright immediately delivered many orders and stirred up the entire sea of stars to find the new master of the bloodthirsty force. The barrier between the star areas. Yen and Ouyang Luo Shuang appeared. This area was a peripheral area of Thunder Firmament Star Area with layers of lightning strikes. Watching carefully, Yen felt familiar with the lightning here. It was very similar to the immemorial Thunder Dragon of Heavenly Monster Tribe. The immemorial Thunder Dragon was one of the monster ancestors of Heavenly Monster Tribe. This ancestor had fallen a very long time ago. However, legends say that after the immemorial Thunder Dragon was killed, its soul divided into many wisps and scattered around the universe. The Heavenly Monster Tribe used to search and try to collect the dragon's wisps to resurrect him. Unfortunately, the Heavenly Monster Tribe had searched for many years, but they couldn't find the immemorial Thunder Dragon's soul to resurrect it. Of course, this mission was postponed forever. He had fused with the origin of the Grace mainland, so he knew many secrets of the Heavenly Monster Tribe. That's how he knew about the legends of the immemorial Thunder Dragon. Today, Yen felt touched when he observed the lightning beams generating in this thunder firmament star area. He vaguely felt that the lightning beams in this thunder firmament star area were the wisps of the immemorial thunder dragon soul. The expert that had delivered him here should know this and have some plan too. Yen knew that the one who had sent him to thunder firmament star area was, of course, an expert cultivating space power Upanishad at a profound level. He understood that this expert's realm should be equal to Carefree. Otherwise, he couldn't have done that. And now, if he wanted to return to Grace Mainland, he could do it with just a flick of his thoughts. But Yen wasn't hurried. He knew that the other had sent him to the peripheral area of the Thunder Firmament Star area where he could discover the secret of the immemorial Thunder Dragon through the lightning here for some reason. Does he want me to collect the immemorial Thunder Dragon's soul? Yen thought and frowned. Eventually, he thought of an idea. His spirit shuddered as if he had just woken up from some magical state. He was bewildered for a while. He pulled himself together and sensed carefully. His expression looked special as he found that the bottleneck that had stopped him from entering second sky of incipient god realm was gone. The confusing parts that he didn't understand when cultivating the star, space, and life and death powers Upanishads became so clear. He got the feeling that as long as he accumulated enough god power, he could break through again. He quickly recognized that it was related to the inexplicable transformation of his soul in the fantasy zone. But he wasn't so sure. He knew something had happened to him because he could feel the subtle changes in his soul and life magnetic field. He couldn't tell what had happened and what it was, but he knew it happened. He turned to Ouyang Luo Shuang, jolted up, and gave a forced smile. Ouyang Luo Shuang gazed at him. Her bright eyes were so chilling. Yen realized that Ouyang Luo Shuang was still confined. She couldn't talk or move. It wasn't different from being chained by the primordial spirit lock. He hurried to lift up the restriction. Then, he didn't wait for Ouyang Luo Shuang to nag him. He discreetly used his life power Upanishad and sent a beam of vitality to Ouyang Luo Shuang's body to heal her wound and make her abdomen even tougher than before Yen had stabbed her. After that essence of life disappeared, Yen paled and spread his arms to admit his mistake. All right, my bad. You can do anything you want of me. After Ouyang Luo Shuang was released, she didn't attack or scold him. She just glared at him coldly. However, under her gaze, Yen felt embarrassed because it was his mistake. He stooped his head and didn't dare to look at her. He behaved and admitted his fault. Ouyang Luo Shuang just looked at him like this for a long time. It was so long that Yen was about to crack before she rose her voice. I just want to ask one question. If my teacher attacked you, would you kill me or not? It was the one question she had thought about all the time when they were traveling. It was also what she was most concerned about. Yen lifted his head, his eyes puzzled. He quieted down. After a long moment, he whispered, I don't actually know. Yen, what kind of man you are? Ouyang Luo Shuang sighed, her eyes complicated. You can leave now. We shouldn't meet later. You're the Heavenly King Carefree's disciple, and I'm the master of the bloodthirsty force. We can't stay together like this. Yen looked at her and sighed inwardly. I'm Carefree's disciple. Why do you want to let me go? Aren't you afraid that I will kill you later? Ouyang Luo Shuang was bewildered, her heart touched. You're you and he is him. You guys are different in my eyes, said Yen. Yes, I am me, and he is him. It's true. So what are you afraid of? Even if we meet later, I'm still Ouyang Luo Shuang. I'm not a member of the God Clan. And you're Yen, not the bloodthirsty forces master something. What are you worried about? Ouyang Luo Shuang was puzzled. Yen was astounded. He immediately understood her idea through her words. He nodded in agreement. Yeah, that's right. Chapter 1292, The Chen Family. Chapter 1292, The Chen Family, _. Ouyang Luo Shuang hadn't left because Yen didn't have much energy remaining. He had consumed a lot of his god power for the trip. Yen didn't ask her to leave as he thought that it was good to have someone protect him now. It was true that he had consumed a lot of energy. By the barriers of Thunder Firmament Star area, he gathered his spirit to see the lightning bolts flash at the barrier. He was so surprised. Now, he could confirm that the lightning here was the wisps of the immemorial Thunder Dragon's soul. However, he didn't know how to resurrect it. He was puzzled. If that expert knew that was the immemorial Thunder Dragon's soul and wanted to revive the immemorial Thunder Dragon, he should have let Heavenly Monster Tribe know about this, especially the Holy Beast Azure Dragon. Why did he want to bring Yen here? Yen didn't understand. The immemorial Thunder Dragon was one of the ancestors of Heavenly Monster Tribe. Although he didn't have the unique echelon in Heavenly Monster Tribe like the 4 Holy Beasts, he was still just as important. With the continent's origin and the memories of the White Tiger and Vermilion Bird, he knew the secrets of Heavenly Monster Tribe. He knew that Vermilion Bird used to fight the immemorial Thunder Dragon and couldn't defeat him. If the monster ancestors of Heavenly Monster Tribe could live until now, they should be at the immortal realm. Once the soul of the immemorial Thunder Dragon was gathered and restored, Heavenly Monster Tribe would have another immortal realm warrior. Also, Yen was sure that Heavenly Monster Tribe would stand on his side. He suddenly understood. This immemorial Thunder Dragon could be a special arrangement that someone had kept here and was waiting for someone to resurrect the dragon. The immemorial Thunder Dragon was a creature born in Grace Mainland during the immemorial epoch. It had used the Origin's power of the continent. The Origin is structured with the Heaven Flames. Oh, the Heaven Flames, the world-extinguishing Thunder Flame, the immemorial Thunder Dragon, Origin. He frowned and tried to find a way to resurrect the immemorial Thunder Dragon. He seemed to grab the key element. His eyes brightened. Someone is coming. Ouyang Luo Shuang furrowed her bold brows, screaming. No need to mind them, Yen said casually. Ouyang Luo Shuang didn't say anything else. She stood upright beside him and looked at him quietly, her bright eyes a little strange. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 3 gold war chariots like beetles maneuvered near them and accelerated toward them. The war chariots carried 12 warriors, 4 on each vehicle. The strongest of them were at Ethereal God Realm and the rest were at Original God Realm. They were from a native force of Thunder Firmament Star area and were working around the Star area barrier. Receiving rights orders, they had to push their patrolling teams in this area. As they had Yen's drawing, they recognized him when they saw him by the barrier. The 3 war chariots hurried to approach them. The 2 first sky of Ethereal God Realm on the other war chariot looked at the highest realm warrior in this group, an expert at 2nd sky of Ethereal God Realm. That expert had gold hair that was flying with the wind. She was a mature woman. Although she looked mild, her eyes were so wise. However, she had an ugly scar across her face. That scar started from the corner of the left eye to the right corner of her mouth. It made her charming face fearsome. She looked at Yen and Ouyang Luo Shuang in the distance and, her face heavy. Madame Lei, he's the man in the picture, said Chen de Chiao, a fat, pale warrior. The woman he had addressed, Madame Lei, was called Chen Lei. This group of warriors was from the Chen family dwelling in this remote area of Thunder Firmament Star area. They were living on a level, for life star. Although the earth and heaven energy here wasn't rich, this area had many precious natural products and mineral stars. The Bradley family had sent a troop to their life star to enslave the Chen family. The warriors of the Chen family had to exploit the ores for them. Chen Lei was the younger sister of the current chief of the Chen family. She had the 2nd sky of Ethereal God Realm cultivation base, which ranked right behind her brother Chen Rong. Chen Lei had based on those mineral stars year-round. Today, as Wright had ordered, she left the base and brought some warriors to this remote barrier area to patrol. She thought that she just needed to come here and move around before returning. She hadn't expected that she could find the one who Wright wanted. As the Bradley family had invaded the star area, it had cut off the connection with the world out there. As the Chens were living in an isolated star area, they didn't know the turbulent commotions in the universe lately. They didn't know that the bloodthirsty force and the God clan were about to fight each other. But Chen Lei wasn't dumb. She knew the one Wright wanted to find wasn't someone they could offend. Thus, even though she knew he was the one they wanted to find, she didn't dare to move. Her face grimaced as she hissed. "DeChiao, don't talk nonsense or report it." Chen DeChiao nodded and followed her orders. His hand clutching the sound stone relaxed. The warriors of the Chen family looked at Chenlei and waited for her decision. As the others were looking at her, Chenlei took a deep breath. Her face became respectful. She flew out of the war chariot alone and slowly moved towards Shiryen. "I am Chenlei from the Chen family on a level 4 life star in the Thunder Firmament star area. Greetings." Wright had given them only a drawing without a name. Thus, she recognized Shiryen, but she couldn't address him. Ouyang Luo Shuang's eyes were clear but cold. She had found Chenlei's team earlier. She had asked Shiryen what to do with them. Shiryen told her to consider everything and just do what she wanted. She hesitated whether she should kill them all or not. She wasn't an innocent girl anymore. After many years moving in the Sea of Stars, she had experienced many sinister events. She knew how to protect herself in a special situation. Sometimes, killing people to survive wasn't a knot in her mind. She thought that it was inevitable. She had adapted well to this mad world. "You guys better not use the Soundstone. Otherwise, you shouldn't dream about continuing your lives." Ouyang Luo Shuang's cold eyes glared at Chen DeChiao's hand hiding in his sleeve. "Put away your Soundstone." Chenlei was a little shaken. She hurried to order her troopers. The Qin warriors hurried to follow her order. They all looked frightened. They were very far from each other, but Ouyang Luo Shuang could recognize that they were holding the Soundstone. It made them scared and feel unsafe. And now, they felt lucky because of Chenlei's wisdom. If they had acted normally and reported to the Bradley family right when they saw them, they would have become corpses now. Chenlei was astounded. Although she was at second sky of ethereal god realm, she felt a massive pressure as if she was beholding an imposing mountain range after she had come near to Ouyang Luo Shuang. She felt dispirited as if she couldn't wiggle. She was so baffled, but she could confirm immediately that this cold girl was at incipient god realm. This finding made her more insecure. "Tell them to come here. We need to ask for more information. We don't even know where we are." "It's a little troublesome, though." Shiryen rubbed his chin and frowned. "Come here, all of you." Ouyang Luo Shuang gave a light shout. Chenlei led her troop. "Before the warriors of the Chen family arrived," she said, "I just said that this place is in Thunder Firmament star area. We're from the Chen family living around here. We've received Sir Wright's order to check this area. He wants to find you. I saw the picture you keep. I'm the one you want to find." "Okay, now tell me. Who is Wright?" "Tell me the current situation of this place," said Shiryen indifferently. As Shiryen cultivated space power Upanishad, even though he consumed a lot of his energy, it wasn't hard to check the moves of low-realm warriors like Chenlei. However, Chenlei's team was panic-stricken when they knew that Shiryen could see every small move of them. Chen DeChiao hurried to explain, "No, we haven't reported anything. We don't." "I know. Otherwise, you would be dead now." Shiryen's face was impatient. Looking at Chenlei, he said, "You. Explain to us." 3,000 years ago, the Bradley family of the God Clan had invaded our Thunder Firmament star area. Then, we've become their dependent star area. Currently, Wright of the Bradley family controls our star area. Wright has second sky of incipient God realm cultivation base. Chenlei reported in detail the events and the situations in Thunder Firmament star area. She had even stressed on Wright's evil, corrupted, and greedy behaviors. She even told them that he kept a lot of beautiful women and made them his pet dogs. While talking, she carefully noticed Shiryen's expression as she wanted to get more information. Shiryen frowned. After listening to her, he nodded. "Sir, why did you come to our Thunder Firmament star area?" "Wright wants to find you." "Is it because you are against them?" Chenlei pried. Before the God Clan's invasion, the Chen family could be considered rich. With many natural products in this remote area, they had quiet and relaxed lives. When the Bradley family came, their doomsday came together. Chenlei and Chenrong's precursors were killed in the battle against the God Clan. Chenrong and Chenlei knew that they couldn't defeat the God Clan. To maintain the family, they had to be subdued. Recently, Chenrong and Chenlei were abused so badly. Today, they even didn't have enough divine crystals to cultivate. The ores that they had exploited were all brought away massively and unceasingly. They couldn't have a bit of it, so they wanted to take revenge. However, they weren't strong enough to resist, so they had to endure this terrible situation. As Qinlei knew Ouyang Luo Shuang had the incipient God Realm cultivation base, she had an idea. She wanted to borrow their forces to do something. Thus, she was so cooperative. Did anything strange used to happen in this barrier area? Since your Chen family always lives here, I guess you should know something. Shiyan didn't answer Qinlei's question, frowning and asking. Although he could confirm that the lightning beams in this area were wisps of the immemorial Thunder Dragon's soul, he didn't know where the dragon's body was. If he wanted to revive the immemorial Thunder Dragon, he needed its corpse too besides collecting the soul. If he could find the corpse with the method he just thought of in his head, he was 70% sure that he could resurrect the immemorial Thunder Dragon. Anything strange? A lot. What do you want to know? Asked Qinlei. The events related to the lightning and thunder. Is there any mountain range that suddenly has lightning and thunder and suddenly produces a lot of crystals with lightning and thunder attribute? Shiyan said directly. Qinlei's eyes brightened, her face surprised. Oh, you're right. Something strange had happened, as you said. My ancestor had recorded something like that. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.